Chapter 196. Grand Emperor Richlush really has the guts to let a divine, sea expert fight a peak Imperial Wind Realm dragon turtle. Chu Fengmian's lips twisted into a cold smile. Dragon turtles were well-known figures among demonlings and had the blood of true dragons running through their veins. They were terrifyingly strong. Generally speaking, dragon turtles were strong enough to fight 3 or even 5 martial artists of the same level. You can choose to forfeit this battle. This is a life-or-death battle, and it's not an illusion. If you die, you will truly perish. Grand Emperor Richlush's cold voice echoed out. If you choose to forfeit now, you can leave safely. A peak Imperial Wind Realm expert isn't something you can stand up to. His voice was devoid of any emotion as he coldly stated the rules of this place. Forfeit? Leave? Chu Fengmian's lips twisted into a faint smile. In this trial, he wouldn't give up even if he encountered a saint, let alone a peak Imperial Wind Realm dragon turtle. Chu Fengmian wasn't going to back down from a trial like this, let alone an opponent like the dragon turtle. If it were any other demonling, he might have been afraid. But this dragon turtle, Chu Fengmian had his own methods. Dragon turtle, why don't we make a deal? Chu Fengmian suddenly stepped forward and spoke to the primordial dragon turtle. Chu Fengmian didn't seem to want to fight at all. He simply walked over, leaving the dragon turtle confused. It had no idea what Chu Fengmian was trying to do. Although this dragon turtle was only an illusory projection, it definitely had its own will. And that was the will of the dragon turtle from 1,000 years ago. The primordial dragon turtle had the ability to think independently. Seeing Chu Fengmian walking over, it spoke with interest. What deal? The dragon turtle said with a cold snort. Master wants me to defeat you. If you want to pass this trial, you have to defeat me. There's no other way. If you want to use any other method, you might as well give up. Is that so? Chu Fengmian said, a confident smile on his face. If this dragon turtle had its own will, then it would be much easier for Chu Fengmian to deal with it. What if I can help you break through to the divine force realm, or even help you break free and transform into a dragon? What do you think? Chu Fengmian said with a smile. Chu Fengmian seemed to have said this before. Speaking of tricking the ancient dragon turtle, this was Chu Fengmian's second time, especially since he had tricked the same ancient dragon turtle twice. It was just that the ancient dragon turtle in front of him was just an illusion from 1,000 years ago. However, since it was the same ancient dragon turtle, it was extremely easy for Chu Fengmian to fool it again, who said that he had to defeat his opponent in this test. Right now, Chu Fengmian was confident that he would be able to make the ancient era's dragon turtle obediently admit defeat without even doing anything. Help me break through to the divine force realm, or even transform into a dragon. After hearing Chu Fengmian's words, the primordial dragon turtle was stunned at first, then he laughed out loud. Even my master was unable to accomplish this. How could a little brat like you be able to accomplish this? I won't believe the nonsense of a little fellow. If you don't have anything else to say, I'm going to make a move. The primordial dragon turtle said in disdain. A wave of spiritual energy had begun to condense on its body. You don't believe me? Then you can see for yourself. Chu Fengmian did not say any more nonsense. On his finger, a drop of golden blood slowly flowed out. This drop of golden blood was much purer than the one that Chu Fengmian had condensed on the deserted island. At that time, Chu Fengmian only had 3 drops of ancient dragon battle essence blood. The blood that he had condensed was enough to drive the ancient era's dragon turtle crazy. Right now, Chu Fengmian had already awakened 10 drops of ancient dragon battle essence blood in his body. Within this drop of blood, there was a pure dragon might that awakened the deepest desire in the ancient era's dragon turtle's heart. This was a desire that came from his bloodline, causing his rationality to vanish in an instant. Give it to me quickly, the ancient era's dragon turtle said urgently. However, the corner of Chu Fengmian's mouth curled into a strange smile. This drop of ancient dragon battle essence blood had already returned to Chu Fengmian's body. Now, you should believe what I said. Chu Fengmian looked at the ancient era's dragon turtle again and saw the desire in his eyes. Chu Fengmian understood that his plan had succeeded. This ancient era's dragon turtle was as greedy as the one that Chu Fengmian had met on the deserted island. However, this was not greed. Such an opportunity was enough for him to reach the sky in a single bound. Not to mention the ancient era's dragon turtle. It would be the same for any other honorable martial artist. What do you want? The ancient era's dragon turtle said anxiously. He looked at the drop of ancient era's dragon battle essence blood, and his heart was filled with anxiety. He could already imagine how pure his bloodline would be after he devoured that drop of ancient era's dragon battle essence blood. After all, it was the ancient era's dragon battle essence blood, which had surpassed the bloodline of a real dragon. Just a drop of it was enough to bring him great benefits. It's very simple. I'll make a deal with you. 2 drops of ancient era's dragon battle essence blood in exchange for you admitting defeat. How about that? Chu Fengmian smiled. Finally, they got to the point. Although Chu Fengmian had the ability to fight against the ancient era's dragon turtle, it would still take a lot of time and effort. Rather than that, he might as well use a more convenient method to deal with it. What? You want me to admit defeat? No way. The ancient era's dragon turtle shook his head hurriedly. I dare not disobey my master's order. Is that so? If so, there's nothing else to talk about. Chu Fengmian said calmly, and his tone was filled with indifference. Even if your master were to punish you, it would not be as valuable as the ancient era's dragon battle essence blood to you. Divine Power Realm and Dragon Ascension. You have to think carefully about these 2 points. Divine Power Realm and Dragon Ascension. Following Chu Fengmian's words, the desire in the ancient era's dragon turtle's eyes became even stronger. To an ancient dragon turtle, these 2 things were what he had dreamed of his entire life. Compared to the punishment, these 2 things were indeed more valuable. 3 drops. As long as you can give me 3 drops of ancient era's dragon battle essence blood, I'll admit defeat and let you pass this round. How about that? The ancient era's dragon turtle thought for a while and said, This is the minimum requirement. Deal. Chu Fengmian smiled. A few drops of ancient era's dragon battle essence blood were enough for Chu Fengmian to recover for a period of time. Chapter 197. Chu Fengmian waved his finger, causing 3 drops of golden blood to form on his fingertip. He flicked his finger, sending them into the dragon turtle. As soon as the 3 drops of quintessence blood touched the dragon turtle, it began to fade away. The dragon turtle was nothing more than an illusory projection, and now that it had lost its will to fight and admitted defeat, it meant that Chu Fengmian had passed. The 3rd trial was supposed to be the most difficult, but Chu Fengmian had passed it with relative ease. The grassland began to fade away as Chu Fengmian crossed the stone bridge and arrived in a strange place. Now that I'm here, it means I passed the 1st trial, right? Chu Fengmian said, looking up into the sky. Not bad. To be able to come here, you have indeed passed the 1st test. All of a sudden, Grand Emperor Rich Lush materialized in front of Chu Fengmian, flanked by Frigid Moonlily. And you're the first to pass, Grand Emperor Rich Lush said. Although you used a bit of trickery, it's true that martial artists can use anything they want. The fact that you won without a fight shows how strong you are. Grand Emperor Rich Lush said calmly. Of course, Grand Emperor Rich Lush knew exactly how Chu Fengmian had passed the first 3 trials. Although Chu Fengmian hadn't actually fought the dragon turtle, the fact that he had defeated it without a fight was a testament to his skill. Chu Fengmian had passed without a hitch. Speak, Grand Emperor Rich Lush said. Now that you've passed the 1st trial, what do you want? Grand Emperor Rich Lush laughed heartily. Although I can't say that I have everything in the 9 zones, I can give you most of the things you want. Grand Emperor Rich Lush's words were filled with confidence. After all, he was the founder of the victorious Martial Kingdom, and it was impossible to even imagine how much wealth he had. Treasures that might be considered precious to Wind Control Realm cultivators were nothing to Grand Emperor Rich Lush. If he wasn't strong enough, he wouldn't have even seen the most valuable treasures. That was why Grand Emperor Rich Lush was so confident. I want a fire-type sage medicine, Chu Fengmian said calmly. Grand Emperor Rich Lush, Chu Fengmian. In response to Chu Fengmian's words, Grand Emperor Rich Lush didn't say anything. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for all of the martial artists present to acquire a treasure from Grand Emperor Rich Lush's treasure storehouse. Chu Fengmian had actually asked for a fire-type sacred medicine for Han Yueli. One had to know that there was only one chance for this. Chu Fengmian had only obtained this chance after passing the first test. Now, he was actually giving it away for free. Oh, fire-type panacea? It seems like you want it for this little girl. Grand Emperor Rich Lush looked over at Chu Fengmian with an enigmatic smile. You're just a little brat, but your appetite isn't small. You actually want a sacred medicine. If it weren't for the fact that I still have some foundation, I might have ended up breaking my promise. Sacred medicine was the pinnacle of spirit medicines in the entire 9 regions. Even ordinary cultivators would not have heard of this term. If you weren't strong enough, you wouldn't even have the chance to come into contact with such words. Therefore, Grand Emperor Rich Lush was a bit taken aback by Chu Fengmian's words. Senior, do you really have a fire-type sacred medicine? Chu Fengmian was actually surprised to hear Grand Emperor Rich Lush's words. Sacred medicines were rare, even to the most powerful experts of the 9 regions. Therefore, Chu Fengmian had only asked to try his luck. Never could he have guessed that Grand Emperor Rich Lush would actually have a fire-type sacred medicine. That's right. Grand Emperor Rich Lush said, I once found a 10,000-year-old flame lotus in a volcano. Although it can't be considered a sacred medicine, a 10,000-year-old flame lotus is definitely a sacred medicine. Even as he spoke, a flame lotus appeared in the palm of his hand. There was a kind of flame burning on the fire lotus. This flame was condensed from the purest fire attribute spiritual energy. A 10,000-year-old flame lotus. Chu Fengmian's eyes shone with a look of longing. To a former Grandmaster apothecary like him, a 10,000-year-old flame lotus was something that he could only dream of. The fire lotus itself was enough to be called a high-grade elixir among elixirs. It was born from lava and would only appear when a volcano erupted. But when volcanoes erupted, they were so powerful that even saints wouldn't dare to get close to them, much less enter them to search for flame lotuses. Generally speaking, flame lotuses were earth-class spirit medicines, and 100,000-year-old flame lotuses were heavenly class. As for 1,000-year-old flame lotuses, they were at the peak of the heavenly class. And 10,000-year-old flame lotuses were considered sacred medicines. You need to think this through. Although the 10,000-year-old flame lotus is precious, it's not very useful to you. Are you sure you want it? Grand Emperor Rich Lush looked over at Chu Fengmian. He knew full well why he wanted the 10,000-year-old flame lotus, and it definitely wasn't for Chu Fengmian. That's right, Chu Fengmian said. Junior wants the 10,000-year-old flame lotus. Chu Fengmian said calmly. Many other spirit medicines, such as the heavenly spirit fruit, were indeed enough to be of great help to the current Chu Fengmian. However, he only had one chance to get a fire-type holy medicine. In all of the kingdom of martial victory, Grand Emperor Rich Lush was probably the only person who could afford to take out a fire-type holy medicine. Han Yueli's frigid toxins couldn't be delayed. Therefore, Chu Fengmian wasn't going to let the opportunity slip by. All right, you can have the 10,000-year-old flame lotus. Chuckling, Grand Emperor Rich Lush handed the 10,000-year-old flame lotus over. Chu Fengmian hurriedly took it, and as soon as it touched his hand, it began to heat up. Chu Fengmian hurriedly channeled his spiritual power to temporarily suppress the flames of the 10,000-year-old fire lotus. It was only slightly hot now. This 10,000-year-old flame lotus is at least 5 or 6 years old. Chu Fengmian was shocked to sense the medicinal strength of the 10,000-year-old flame lotus. The medicinal strength of the 10,000-year-old flame lotus was at least 5 or 6 years old, which put it in the middle of the pack among holy medicines. Sacred medicine was also divided into different grades. For example, the ordinary 10,000-year fire lotus could only be considered a low-grade sacred medicine. But this 10,000-year-old flame lotus was a mid-grade holy medicine. Chapter 198. You don't have to do this. Why don't you try something else? Han Yueli said, looking at Chu Fengmian hesitantly. Considering your latent talent, you'll benefit even more from other treasures. She didn't have much of a relationship with Chu Fengmian, and this was her first time meeting him in the Holy Land. Han Yueli couldn't understand why Chu Fengmian would be so stubborn as to give up this opportunity to save her. Other treasures don't mean much to me, he said. Since I said I'd cure your frigid poison, if I didn't, wouldn't that mean I didn't keep my word? Looking at Han Yueli, Chu Fengmian chuckled. Once the test is over, I'll help you get rid of the poison. Why was he so determined to save Han Yueli? Perhaps in his heart, Han Yueli was just another shadow. Elder fourth sister, I wonder if you're doing well, Chu Fengmian murmured. At the same time, on the other side, another figure stepped onto the stone bridge and arrived at this place. It was none other than the red-haired junior house lord of the Torch Flame Society, young Sir Flame South. Apparently, he had passed the first test. However, he didn't look as relaxed as Chu Fengmian. He was gasping for breath, and his body was riddled with injuries. Although everything on the stone bridge was just an illusion, all the attacks received would still be reflected back to the martialists. That was why Grand Emperor Richlush had said that the test was dangerous. I should be the first to pass, right? Young Master Yannan walked out and muttered to himself with a smile on his face. He was well aware of how difficult the test was. If it weren't for the fact that he had his own trump cards, he would have been able to pass. He simply couldn't believe that anyone could be faster than him. However, before he could finish speaking, a faint and relaxed voice suddenly sounded in his ears. Not bad. Finally, I'm not the only one waiting here. What? Young Sir Flame South blurted, his expression one of shock and anger. What surprised him was that there was actually someone who passed the first test faster than him. He was angry because of the mocking tone in Chu Fengmian's voice. It was as if he was mocking him for having just passed the test. Chu Fengmian, why are you here? Prince Nan raised his head. The moment he saw Chu Fengmian, his eyes were filled with disbelief. The first person to pass the test was actually Chu Fengmian, who was the weakest among all of them. If Prince Nan were to guess who would be the first to pass the test, he would probably say that Chu Fengmian would be the last. Even if Chu Fengmian was the newcomer king of Wuxing Academy and a super genius who had broken the odds of the highest heaven realm. So what? After all, a genius was a genius, not an expert. A genius who had yet to grow up was nothing to be afraid of. In his opinion, Chu Fengmian might not even be able to pass this test. However, Chu Fengmian was actually standing in front of him now. Moreover, Chu Fengmian's body didn't have any injuries. He looked very relaxed. Impossible. It's impossible for you to pass these 3 tests. Moreover, you did it so easily. Prince Nan said with a frown. He had experienced these 3 tests before. Naturally, he was able to pass them easily. The first test tested the warrior's endurance. Once the warrior's endurance was insufficient and his spiritual power was exhausted, he would naturally die in the hands of the army and fail. The second test tested the warrior's explosive power. It wasn't difficult for a genius to fight above his level. This was comparable to the difficulty of the 60th level of the Heavenly Road. It was indeed a big test for them. Prince Nan believed that Chu Fengmian had a way to pass these 2 tests. However, the third test, he refused to believe that Chu Fengmian was a match for the primordial dragon turtle. He had used all his trump cards and even some of the candle flame sex taboos to barely defeat the primordial dragon turtle at the Imperial Wind Realm. A divine sea realm warrior could defeat the ancient dragon turtle at the peak of the Imperial Wind Realm? He couldn't believe it even if he cracked his head. Yes, it must be because your test is different from ours. That's why you can pass it so easily. Prince Nan racked his brains to come up with this explanation. The only possibility was that Chu Fengmian's test was different. Otherwise, there was no way Prince Nan would believe that Chu Fengmian was so strong. Idiot! Chu Fengmian sneered in response to Prince Nan's words. I can't believe you have the guts to say something so idiotic. What? Before Prince Nan could say anything else, Grand Emperor Richlush interrupted. Everyone's test is the same. If you don't believe me, you can withdraw from the test. Prince Nan's face instantly turned very unsightly. He couldn't believe that Chu Fengmian would be the first to pass the test. That was why he questioned him like that. And yet, wasn't that a question directed at Grand Emperor Richlush? Who was Grand Emperor Richlush? How could he be questioned by a junior? Prince Yin Nan could tell that Grand Emperor Richlush was angry. Chu Fengmian's idiot was a perfect description of Prince Yin Nan. Senior, please forgive me for my impulsiveness. Young Sir Flaminin bowed his head respectfully to Grand Emperor Richlush. If he provoked the wrath of Grand Emperor Richlush, then it wouldn't be a matter of whether or not he would be able to get the legacy. If Grand Emperor Richlush was truly enraged, he could crush Yang Qi as easily as crushing an ant, even if he was just a projection. Speaking rudely. I'll let you off this time. I'll consider you as having passed the first test. However, your reward will be gone. Take it as a lesson for speaking rudely. Prince Yin Nan's face darkened. This sentence caused Prince Yin Nan's face to turn into the color of a pig's liver. After a while, he still replied respectfully. Many thanks for your forgiveness, Senior. Prince Yin Nan had paid a heavy price to pass the first test and get his reward. He had used several taboo techniques and had even injured himself. Despite paying such a heavy price, he still hadn't gotten his reward. It was like losing the wife and the soldiers after losing the bait. Prince Yin Nan blamed everything on Chu Fengmian. If it weren't for Chu Fengmian's mockery, he wouldn't have gone so far as to question Grand Emperor Richlush. Chapter 199. When Chu Fengmian saw the look in young Sir Flame South's eyes, he smiled. His original plan had been to provoke young Sir Flame South and put him in a bad mood. Who could have guessed that young Sir Flame South would directly question Grand Emperor Richlush, and that he would lose his reward? This was good news for Chu Fengmian. Young Master Yin Nan had been scheming against Chu Fengmian since the beginning. In order to obtain the Scarlet Flame Sword from Chu Fengmian, he had already regarded Chu Fengmian as his mortal enemy. Chu Fengmian was happy to see his mortal enemy suffer a loss. Just you wait, young Sir Flame South said. Once this test is over, you'll die. Prince Yin Nan said angrily. His eyes were filled with killing intent. If it weren't for the fact that Grand Emperor Richlush was here, he would have already attacked. Kill me? You're not strong enough to do that. Chu Fengmian chuckled coldly. Even as the words left his mouth, another figure appeared on the bridge. It was Chu Ning. Chu Ning stepped out onto the bridge and saw Chu Fengmian and young Sir Flame South. When he saw Chu Fengmian, he wasn't particularly surprised. Unlike young Sir Flame South, he knew that Chu Fengmian had the secret of the Richlush steel. With the steel, passing the first test wasn't an impossible task. Chu Ning's only hope was that Chu Fengmian was still alive. That was the only way he could kill him and take the Richlush steel. Before long, Chung Tian Kong stepped out, followed by Mo Roashue from the Frigid Snow Pavilion, the holy son of the black market, and Fong Pachuan from the Three Immortals Island. Although the first test was difficult, all of the martial artists present were geniuses from the victorious warrior nation. Therefore, all of them passed. When the last person stepped out, the bridge began to fade away. Excellent. Although the first test was just a greeting gift, the fact that all of you passed proves that the geniuses of this generation are not incompetent. Grand Emperor Richlush laughed heartily. A greeting gift? Upon hearing Grand Emperor Richlush's words, many of the people present couldn't help but curse inwardly. How could the three tests, especially the last one, the dragon turtle, be considered a greeting gift? Which one of them didn't use all their means to pass these three tests with great difficulty? As far as Grand Emperor Richlush was concerned, it was more like a greeting gift. But then again, to someone like Grand Emperor Richlush, this test really wasn't much. Since you've all passed the test, you can ask for anything you want. I'll naturally keep my word. However, this king will make it clear that if this king does not have what you need, this opportunity will naturally be considered to have been used up. So, do not be greedy, understand? Looking around, Grand Emperor Richlush pointed at Chu Ning. Let's start with you. Yes. When Chu Ning saw that Grand Emperor Richlush was looking at him, he hurriedly replied respectfully, I hope that Senior can bestow upon me an earth-grade body-tempering pill. The cultivation technique that Chu Ming practiced was a body cultivator. The strongest part of his body was his own body. Therefore, a body-tempering pill was extremely useful to him. At first, Chuning had been planning to ask for a heavenly-class medicinal pill, but after hearing what Grand Emperor Richlush had said, he changed his mind. Heaven-class pills were extremely rare in the 9 realms, let alone heavenly-class ones. If he didn't have one, he would be wasting his chance. Therefore, he decided to play it safe and ask for an Earth-grade pill. A mid-grade, Earth-grade body pill. It should meet your requirements. Grand Emperor Richlush produced a jade bottle, within which was a yellow medicinal pill. Then he tossed it over to Chuning. "Many thanks, Senior." Chuning caught the pill and hurriedly offered his thanks. This dark body elixir was enough to help him reach the peak of the wind-controlling realm. It was definitely a great benefit. "Next, what do you want?" Grand Emperor Richlush said, pointing at Chung Tiankong. "Senior, I need an Earth-grade defensive spirit item," Chung Tiankong said. Chung Tiankong said, "An Earth-level protective spiritual tool was enough to withstand countless attacks. It would make his upcoming assessment much safer." "Very well." Without wasting any words, Grand Emperor Richlush produced a suit of black scale armor. A low-grade Earth-grade spirit item, black spear armor. It should meet your requirements. Chung Tiankong took the armor, a look of delight on his face. After all, defensive spirit items were even rarer than offensive spirit items. In fact, the black spear armor was even more valuable than Chu Fengmian's Scarlet Flame Sword. Next up was Ink Ruoxue. She wanted an Ice-type spirit sword, a mid-grade Earth-grade Frigid Soul Sword. This Cold Soul Sword was enough to increase Mo Ruoxue's strength by more than 30%. It was a great harvest. As for the Holy Sun, he wanted an extremely bizarre Heart Devil fruit. It wasn't a spirit medicine, but rather a wretched object. Supposedly, anyone who saw it would have a Heart Devil planted in their heart, making it an incomparably dangerous wretch. But to the Holy Sun, who cultivated the Heart Devil slaughtering incantation, it was definitely a valuable treasure. It was far more useful than any spirit item or medicinal pill. As for Feng Pakshuan, he wanted a medicinal pill that could be used to break through to the God Power level. It was a Sage Breakthrough pill, which could increase one's chances of breaking through to the God Power level by 10%. Don't underestimate that 10%. To a God Power level expert, even 0.5% increase was something that many people would be willing to pay a fortune for. A Sage Breakthrough pill like that could be sold for tens of millions of energy convergence pills in the outside world. Although Feng Pakshuan didn't seem to have any goals, he was actually very ambitious and was already planning to break through to the God Power level. Now that you've all received your rewards, we can begin the second trial. Grand Emperor Richlush's voice rang out. "Senior, what about those two?" Feng Pakshuan asked curiously, pointing at Chu Fengmian and young Sir Flame South Flame. Although they had all received their rewards, they had no idea what Chu Fengmian and young Sir Flame South Flame had received. "I've already given Chu Fengmian his reward. As for him, he offended me and lost his reward." Grand Emperor Richlush looked coldly at young Sir Flame South Flame. "Offended me and lost his reward." Hearing these words, everyone present was stunned at first, then a smile appeared in their eyes. This reward was simply a great benefit. It was a great opportunity for any warrior. However, young Master Nonli had inexplicably lost the reward. Chapter 200. Damn it. Damn it. That damned Chu Fengmian. I'm going to kill him. Young Sir Flame South felt like he was about to go crazy when he saw the looks in everyone's eyes. Especially when he heard about the other people's rewards, young Master Yinnan's heart was filled with jealousy. All of them had received a large amount of fortune, except for him. And the main culprit was none other than Chu Fengmian. His hatred for Chu Fengmian only grew deeper and deeper. Since you've all passed the first test, we can begin the second test. Grand Emperor Richlush looked around at the crowd. The second test is to pass through the remaining 5 doors. Whoever can pass all of them will pass the second test. Behind Grand Emperor Richlush were 5 gates of the path of martial arts, all of which seemed to contain some sort of mystery. The stone bridge had been filled with illusions, but as far as Grand Emperor Richlush was concerned, it was nothing more than a greeting gift. Although the 5 gates seemed ordinary, no one dared to underestimate what lay behind them. No one wanted to be the first to enter. After all, they only had one chance, and they had to be careful. Humph. Since no one wants to take the initiative, I'll be the first. Young Master Yin Nan snorted coldly when he saw the large door. He stepped forward and entered. He had been the only one who hadn't received a reward for passing the first test, and that had left him fuming with rage. Chuckling coldly, he stepped through the first gate. However, less than 5 minutes after Flame South Young Master stepped into the door, his body was thrown out of the door. Young Sir Flame South's face was a mask of terror, and he seemed to have gone mad. Kill! 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 Prince Yin Nan continued to roar as he fell into a frenzy. A heart devil planted in him. How could young Sir Flame South have suddenly gone mad? Countless faces fell when they saw what was happening to young Sir Flame South. Young Sir Flame South had only just stepped through the first gate, and yet he was thrown out in less than 5 minutes. From the look of it, he had already gone mad. Break! Off to the side, Grand Emperor Rich Lush snorted coldly. The crazed look on young Master Yin Nan's face gradually disappeared. The demon in his heart was also destroyed. Thank you for saving me, Senior Grand Emperor Rich Lush, young Sir Flame South said. You have failed the test. You no longer have the qualifications to remain in the test grounds. Grand Emperor Rich Lush said coldly. He waved his hand, causing a spatial rift to appear in front of young Sir Flame South, which pulled him out of the testing area. Prince Yin Nan, you can't even pass through the first gate. What exactly is hidden behind this door? The other martialists couldn't help but think to themselves. The moment they saw young Master Yin Nan being thrown out, they felt a chill in their hearts. Young Master Yin Nan's strength was definitely not weaker than any of them. As the young master of the Candle Flame sect, he had many trump cards in his hands. However, with such strength, they couldn't even pass through the first gate and were expelled. None of them were much stronger than young Sir Flame South. Therefore, when they saw what had happened to him, none of them dared to enter the test grounds. A demon in the heart is deeply rooted. That means there must be a demon in the heart behind this first gate. Chu Fengmian thought to himself as he looked at the first gate. The first 3 stages of the test tested the strength of a martialist. To a martialist, strength was the most basic factor. But in addition to strength, the mind was also important. Without a strong mind, a martialist would never become a powerful expert. Although young Sir Flame South was strong, his mind was immature. After being ridiculed by Chu Fengmian, he had provoked Grand Emperor Rich Lush and lost his reward. Therefore, Chu Fengmian wasn't too surprised that he had fallen in front of the first gate. At the very least, the first gate tested the mind of a martialist. I'll go, Chu Fengmian said. Chu Fengmian suddenly opened his mouth and said. He moved his feet and walked up. His actions immediately attracted the attention of the other martialists. Why is Chu Fengmian so confident? Even Prince Yin Nan couldn't pass. What ability does Chu Fengmian have to pass? How arrogant. But that's good too. With him around, we'll be able to observe the situation. Everyone had different thoughts, but no one said anything. They quietly watched as Chu Fengmian prepared to enter the first door. Be careful, Han Yueli said in a low voice from the side. His voice was extremely soft, and no one else present could hear him clearly. Only Chu Fengmian, whose 5 senses were far superior to those of ordinary people, was able to hear it clearly. I will. The corners of Chu Fengmian's mouth curled up into a smile as he secretly transmitted a message to Han Yueli. With a move of his feet, he stepped through the first door. The moment both of Chu Fengmian's feet stepped into the first door, the world in front of him started to spin. In an instant, countless amounts of fog appeared. Chu Fengmian could vaguely make out a person's silhouette in the fog. Who are you? Chu Fengmian looked at the figure in front of him and suddenly asked, Who am I? Shouldn't you know better? Chu Jianbai. That figure suddenly spoke. His voice was almost the same as Chu Fengmian's voice. Through the fog, Chu Fengmian could already tell that the figure in front of him was Chu Fengmian. Heart's demon. Chu Fengmian coldly spat out 2 words. Chu Fengmian naturally knew what the figure in front of him was. He was able to call out the name Chu Jianbai. Only his heart's demon. Any cultivator would have a heart's demon. No matter if they were strong or weak, as long as they had the heart, there would be a heart's demon. However, the heart's demon would usually be suppressed by the cultivator and wouldn't appear easily. However, after entering the first door, the heart's demon would be directly drawn out. The test of the first door was to defeat one's heart's demon. Since you've already guessed it, why did you still come in? The figure looked at Chu Fengmian with a strange smile on his face. Chapter 201. Getting rid of heart devils will be as easy as flipping my hand. Chu Fengmian's lips twisted into a cold smile. The reason he had stepped through the first door wasn't just to pass Grand Emperor Richlush's test. Getting rid of his heart devil would also bring him countless benefits. Getting rid of heart devils was the first thing that every paragon had to do to reach the god power level and become a sage. The first thing one had to do was get rid of the heart devil. Now that Chu Fengmian had gotten rid of his heart devil, it would pave the way for him to reach the god power level. Although Grand Emperor Richlush's test was difficult, anyone who passed would benefit immensely from it. "Get rid of my heart devil," the shadowy figure said, laughing loudly. Heart devils are born in the heart. Unless you kill yourself, they'll exist forever. Besides, it's hard to say whether or not you'll be able to kill me today. I know you're a consummate genius with countless trump cards, but sadly for you, I know everything about you, and I know exactly what your biggest heart devil is. Laughing heartily, the shadowy figure in front of Chu Fengmian suddenly became visible, along with countless other figures and boulders. Everything that was happening before his eyes was none other than the scene of countless supremacy beings surrounding and killing this white-haired old man in the sky. Master, Chu Fengmian had long since guessed that this heart devil would do something to him. And yet, when he saw the Lord of the Sword Dao being surrounded by experts from the other sex, he couldn't help but tremble. It was a scene that he would never forget. He had personally witnessed the Lord of the Sword Dao being surrounded by experts from the 7 great sections. It's not over yet. The shadowy figure chuckled, and the scene in front of him continued to change. Chu Fengmian had witnessed with his own eyes how the experts of the 7 great sects had chased after his senior brothers and sisters. And now, he was seeing it all through his heart devil. If the first scene had only caused a ripple of shock in Chu Fengmian's heart, then he had continued to watch. To Chu Fengmian, it was as if he had experienced it himself. Chu Fengmian's face was flushed red. Endless anger filled Chu Fengmian's mind. He couldn't help but clench his hands into fists. Don't you think you were powerless back then? Now, I'll give you the power to change everything. The shadowy figure's voice echoed out in Chu Fengmian's mind. In the blink of an eye, Chu Fengmian was filled with boundless power. This kind of power surpassed the saints and everything Chu Fengmian knew. Chu Fengmian felt that he could change everything with just a wave of his hand. Of course, the murderous intent in his eyes grew stronger as he slowly raised his hand. What? That figure clearly didn't expect Chu Fengmian to suddenly attack him, and his expression abruptly changed. Now that I have the power to change everything, it's a pity that it's all an illusion. Even if I change everything now, I can't bring my master back to life. Chu Fengmian's eyes flashed with killing intent, and he grabbed the figure with boundless spiritual power in his palm. Suddenly, the figure was completely crushed in Chu Fengmian's hand. His inner demon was that he didn't have the power to protect others. However, Chu Fengmian already had the spiritual vein in his life. He didn't need to put his mind on such an illusion. What Chu Fengmian wanted to do was to truly kill his way into the 7 great sects and annihilate them. He didn't want to be immersed in this illusion. The illusion in front of Chu Fengmian disappeared after he destroyed his inner demon. Then, a new door appeared in front of him. Chu Fengmian didn't hesitate. He moved his feet and continued to step into the second door. The second test had a total of 5 stages. Chu Fengmian had just passed the first stage, and there were 4 more stages waiting for him. The moment Chu Fengmian stepped into the second door, a scorching heat wave swept over his body. Huh, It was a scorching heat wave to the extreme. After stepping into the second door, Chu Fengmian felt that he was almost in a sea of fire. The whole space was a boundless sea of fire. Chu Fengmian stepped into it and instinctively burst out all the spiritual power in his body, forming a barrier in front of him. He tried to resist the heat wave. However, this spiritual power barrier didn't isolate the heat from the outside at all. Instead, Chu Fengmian felt that his body was almost roasted. What's going on? This sea of fire can't even be isolated by my spiritual power? Chu Fengmian frowned. With his spiritual power, it was impossible for him to not be able to isolate this kind of heat. However, his spiritual power barrier was useless now. Don't waste your spiritual power. This sea of fire is actually an illusory realm. Xing Xian's voice suddenly sounded in Chu Fengmian's mind. I didn't expect you to be stumped by this little illusory realm. It seems like you're quite knowledgeable. Xing Xian's voice also carried a bit of teasing. After following Chu Fengmian for so long, he naturally knew that Chu Fengmian had a great secret. Chu Fengmian's experience alone was far beyond other warriors. Chu Fengmian even knew a lot of things that were no less than some of the strongest warriors in the 9 regions. Now, this little illusory realm stumped Chu Fengmian. This made Xing Xian a little surprised, and he didn't quite understand. Illusory realm? Xing Xian's words suddenly woke Chu Fengmian up. Although the surrounding sea of fire was scorching, Chu Fengmian didn't feel any danger. It turned out that the surrounding sea of fire was actually an illusory realm. Illusory realms were actually not unfamiliar to warriors. Some warriors whose strength had reached the wind-controlling realm could condense illusory realms. When facing an enemy, the sudden appearance of an illusory realm was enough to change the situation of the battle. Chapter 202. In his past life, Chu Fengmian had read a lot of books and had done a lot of research. However, this was his first time seeing an illusion like this. The most basic requirement for creating one was that one had to be in the wind-riding realm. In his past life, Chu Fengmian didn't even have a spirit meridian, so how could he possibly have been in the wind-riding realm? Because of that, Chu Fengmian had only heard rumors about illusions and had never truly studied them. In fact, this was his first time seeing one. How do I break this illusion? Chu Fengmian asked quietly. Chu Fengmian was indeed not afraid of encountering other things, but this illusion alone made Chu Fengmian somewhat helpless for a moment. How do I break it? Xian Xian said. This illusion is just the beginning of the real thing. It seems Grand Emperor Richlush intentionally left a flaw in it. Otherwise, how could you possibly break it with your current strength? Clearly, Xian Xian didn't think much of the illusion at all. The illusions he had seen before were 100 times more terrifying than this. Senior, even if Grand Emperor Richlush had used all of his power to create this illusion, he wouldn't be worried. And this illusion was riddled with flaws. It's simple. All you have to do is find the core and break it with your sword. Then the illusion will vanish. Xian Xian said calmly. It's that simple. Chu Fengmian said, a strange expression on his face. If what Xian Xian said was true, then this illusion was a bit too easy to break. Even if Grand Emperor Richlush had intentionally created this illusion to make it simple, it was still his test. There was no way it could be as simple as Xian Xian said. Of course, generally speaking, it's possible to break an illusion created by anyone under the Great Sage level. Xian Xian explained. Don't underestimate this illusion. But don't underestimate this illusion. Just this illusion alone, an ordinary martial artist at the peak of the wind-controlling realm may not be able to break it. It's easy to break an illusion, but not necessarily easy. Everyone knows how to break an illusion, but whether or not you can find the core is a big problem. This illusion will be a good training exercise for you. Don't expect me to tell you where the core is. You'll have to find it yourself. After Xing Xian finished speaking, his voice disappeared. It seemed like he had fallen into a deep slumber once again. At the very most, Chu Fengmian would have lost the legacy of Grand Emperor Richlush. That wouldn't have been enough to harm his life. Xing Xian naturally had no interest in caring. What he wanted to do was to protect Chu Fengmian's life and help him grow. For Chu Fengmian, This illusion was indeed a form of training. "Find the core," Chu Fengmian murmured. He raised his head and looked at the sea of fire in front of him. He suddenly understood that it was not as easy to break the illusion as he had imagined. In this endless sea of fire, although it was an illusion, the heat would still constantly burn the bodies of the warriors. When they could no longer endure it, they would be trapped in this illusion and die. If one wanted to find the core and break it, it was indeed impossible to do so without a sufficiently outstanding spiritual sense. However, it wasn't difficult for Chu Fengmian to find the core. "Sword," Chu Fengmian said inwardly, and the image of a sword appeared in front of him. As Chu Fengmian poured his spiritual power into it, it split into hundreds, perhaps even thousands, of identical sword images. In the blink of an eye, 10,000 sword images appeared around Chu Fengmian. One sword, 10,000 layers. This was one of the highest levels of sword intent. Although it couldn't compare to the infinite transformations, it was still something that countless sword cultivators dreamed of. But for Chu Fengmian, using this level of sword intent wasn't difficult at all. "If I can't find it, then I might as well not look for it. I'll just kill everything in this sea of fire. I refuse to believe that I won't be able to find the core." Chu Fengmian laughed coldly in his heart. With a thought, he sent out countless streams of sword light that danced about in the sea of fire. One stream of sword energy after another slashed madly through the sea of fire. It was as if 10,000 warriors were searching for the core in this sea of fire. So what if the sea of fire was enormous? As long as Chu Fengmian destroyed any corner of the formation, he would naturally be able to find the core. No matter how well it was hidden, it would be meaningless. He's really reckless. Seeing Chu Fengmian's actions, Xing Xian couldn't help but shake his head. He thought that Chu Fengmian would have to search for it himself. He didn't expect that Chu Fengmian would use such a method to break the illusion. Only Chu Fengmian could use such a method to break the illusion with force. Even if others could achieve one sword 10,000 layers, they couldn't be like Chu Fengmian, who had endless spiritual power to split the sword images. This was indeed Chu Fengmian's most unique method. Sword images flashed all over the sky. Soon, one of his sword images found a hidden place in an area of the sea of fire. Is this the core of the illusion? Break it! The moment Chu Fengmian felt it, he sent out countless sword images to slash at the core. Suddenly, the entire core was shattered, and the surrounding flames were gradually extinguished. The illusion was broken, and Chu Fengmian passed through the second gate. Just like before, the third door suddenly opened in front of Chu Fengmian. It seemed to be waiting for Chu Fengmian. The first gate is an inner devil, and the second is an illusion. I wonder what the third gate will hold. A confident smile appeared on Chu Fengmian's face. He was determined to get the legacy of Grand Emperor Richlush, and this trial wasn't going to be a problem for him. Without the slightest hesitation, Chu Fengmian stepped into the third gate. The gate led to an enormous forest, and as soon as Chu Fengmian entered, the howls of countless beasts could be heard. Demonlings? Chu Fengmian looked around and frowned. All of a sudden, an enormous bird appeared up in the sky. Its claws extended as it swiped toward Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian recognized it immediately. It was a demonling known as a wind flame bird, and was in the third division of the wind control realm. Crimson Flame. Chapter 203. As soon as the Scarlet Flame sword came out, Chu Fengmian's sword flashed and slashed at the Firestorm bird. The Firestorm bird was killed by Chu Fengmian's sword. Chu Fengmian could kill a Firestorm bird at the third level of the Imperial Wind Realm with one slash. Could it be that the third gate is to kill demonic beasts? Chu Fengmian frowned and thought to himself, each of the 5 gates should be more difficult than the previous one. The third gate should not be so simple. A Firestorm bird at the third level of the Imperial Wind Realm could be easily killed by others, let alone Chu Fengmian. The test of the third gate seemed to be too simple. However, in the next second, 2 huge white tigers rushed over from the forest. White Sand Tiger, a demonic beast at the 4th level of the Imperial Wind Realm. Chu Fengmian saw the 2 white sand tigers rushing over and picked up the Scarlet Flame sword to meet them. His figure moved, and in the blink of an eye, he was in front of one of the white sand tigers. With a swing of his sword, he slashed the white sand tiger's waist. Instantly, the white sand tiger was killed. The other white sand tiger roared and pounced on Chu Fengmian. Humph! Chu Fengmian snorted and waved the scarlet flame sword. A layer of flame condensed and slashed at the white sand tiger. The two white sand tigers were more difficult to deal with than the firestorm bird. However, Chu Fengmian was not afraid of the white sand tigers with the scarlet flame sword. Under the sea of fire, the white sand tiger was forced to retreat. However, almost at the same time, a strong aura suddenly came from the ground where Chu Fengmian was. It made Chu Fengmian jump away. Almost at the same time, the ground under Chu Fengmian's feet cracked. A huge python that was over 300 meters long suddenly opened its bloody mouth and drilled out from the ground. If Chu Fengmian hadn't dodged in time, he would have been swallowed by this huge python. Thick earth python, a demonic beast at the 6th level of the Imperial Wind Realm. Chu Fengmian looked at the giant python. He did not expect that another demonic beast would appear when he was dealing with the two white sand tigers. Moreover, the strength of the thick earth python was 10 times more terrifying than the white sand tigers. The firestorm bird and the white sand tigers could only be regarded as the best among the ordinary demonic beasts. The thick earth python was a kind of sentient demonic beast with a sentient spirit. Its strength was several times more terrifying than ordinary demonic beasts. How many demonic beasts are there in the test of the third gate? While dodging, Chu Fengmian also hurriedly urged his divine sense to scan the surroundings. In less than a minute, 4 demonic beasts had already appeared. How many demonic beasts were there in this place? Chu Fengmian Lin was beast in the forest was a demonic beast. The forest was densely packed with demonic beasts. There were at least 100 sentient demonic beasts and thousands of ordinary demonic beasts. Beast was beast was beast 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 was beast 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 was beast. There was flame beast was beast was beast beast beasts. Was beast was beast. There were thousands flame beasts was a large flock of wind firebirds. There were also countless demonic beasts hiding underground. They could attack Chu Fengmian at any time. The test for the third gate is actually these thousands of demonic beasts. Chu Fengmian muttered to himself. At the same time, Chu Fengmian also noticed that these monstrous beasts seemed to be under some sort of restriction and could only exist for 7 days. It seemed like the test of the third gate was to survive for 7 days under the pursuit of these demonic beasts. 7 days was an extremely short period of time for cultivators, but if they were constantly being hunted down, it would not be easy to get by. It had to be known that these tens of thousands of monster beasts were attacking the warriors at every moment. There was no time for them to rest or recover their spirit power. Even if the strength of these demonic beasts was not very strong, the difficulty of this test would definitely be frighteningly high when there were so many of them. These tens of thousands of demonic beasts are enough for me to practice my sword art. Chu Fengmian observed the demonic beasts and suddenly laughed in his heart. Although there were many of these demonic beasts, their strength was not particularly strong. With so many demonic beasts, the blood chi was extremely dense. Escape? Chu Fengmian had the divine pulse, so there was no need for him to escape. His spirit power was endless. If any of these demonic beasts came, he would just kill them. Moreover, Chu Fengmian could practice his sword art while killing these demonic beasts. Sword art of massacre. What Chu Fengmian was planning to practice was one of the famous sword arts of the 9 regions, the sword art of massacre. Although the sword art of massacre was a sword art, it did not have a grade. This was because this sword art of massacre required more creatures to be killed. The more blood chi would be refined, and the more powerful it would be. Although this sword art of massacre was extremely powerful, Chu Fengmian did not plan to practice it because once he did, he would have to kill at least 1 million creatures. However, looking at so many demonic beasts, Chu Fengmian suddenly realized that this was the perfect opportunity for him to practice the sword art of massacre. The blood chi of a demonic beast was 1,000 times that of an ordinary human. With so many demonic beasts, it was definitely enough for Chu Fengmian to practice the sword art of massacre. It was even possible for him to practice the sword art of massacre to the minor accomplishment realm. The third test had given Chu Fengmian a great gift. Chu Fengmian laughed loudly and picked up the scarlet flame sword. His blood chi suddenly expanded, and he rushed towards the thick earth python. Within his body, 10 drops of ancient battle dragon blood essence burst out. Under the supreme dragon might, the thick earth python's heart was filled with a trace of fear. Almost at the same time, Chu Fengmian's sword had already slashed down. The thick earth python was instantly killed by Chu Fengmian. Endless blood chi spread out from the thick earth python's body and integrated into Chu Fengmian's body. This blood chi was a necessity for practicing the sword art of massacre. Now that Chu Fengmian had killed thousands of demonic beasts to practice the sword art of massacre, the sword art of massacre that Chu Fengmian practiced was definitely not inferior to the sword art of massacre that had been used to kill millions of demonic beasts. After the thick earth python was killed, Chu Fengmian did not stay idle. These demonic beasts were the perfect nourishment for practicing the sword art of massacre. Chu Fengmian moved his feet and rushed towards the white sand tiger once again. His sword pierced the white sand tiger's head and absorbed all the blood chi within. Chapter 204. Good. Seeing hundreds of demonic beasts rushing over at the same time, ordinary warriors would probably turn around and run away. However, Chu Fengmian was extremely excited when he saw this scene. These demonic beasts were all high-grade blood chi, which could help him condense the sword art of slaughter. Now that Chu Fengmian had absorbed the blood chi of the thick earth python and the white sand tiger, he could barely activate the sword art of slaughter. Although it was still immature, as long as he killed more demonic beasts and absorbed their blood chi, the sword art of slaughter could continue to be perfected. Kill. Chu Fengmian indifferently spat out the word kill. With this word, endless killing intent spread out from Chu Fengmian's body. Under this killing intent, fear appeared in the eyes of many demonic beasts. One of the most powerful points of the sword art of slaughter was that before the sword was drawn, the person would feel cold. Generally, warriors with weaker minds would be scared out of their wits and fall into a disadvantageous position before the battle. Most of these demonic beasts were similar in strength to the white sand tiger. There was only one fire ape, one rock bear, and 2 Xiantian demonic beasts. These 2 Xiantian demonic beasts should be the leaders of this group of demonic beasts. I'll kill them first and wait for the other demonic beasts to panic. Then I'll kill them all. Chu Fengmian made up his mind and took the lead before the demonic beasts rushed over. Kill. With this word, Chu Fengmian's sword was filled with a terrifying blood chi. He suddenly slashed out. Slaughter of the human world. A blood-red sword chi suddenly slashed at the fire ape. Boom! The fire ape's body was directly blown apart. Chu Fengmian grabbed with his big hand and absorbed countless blood chi, which merged into Chu Fengmian's body and made his blood chi more intense. Roar! Seeing that the fire ape was killed by a single sword strike, the rock bear roared, and a huge amount of earth spirit power condensed and turned into a huge spear, thrusting towards Chu Fengmian. It's useless. Chu Fengmian's mind flickered, and another blood-colored sword ray flashed, cutting the huge spear in half. At the same time, Chu Fengmian's figure moved and arrived in front of the rock bear. His sword pierced into the rock bear's body, and countless blood chi was absorbed by Chu Fengmian once again. The blood and chi of these 2 Xiantian realm demon beasts aren't any weaker than that of the thick earth python. I can feel that the slaughter sword principle has become even more powerful. Chu Fengmian was overjoyed. Every time he devoured a portion of blood chi, Chu Fengmian could feel how powerful his massacre sword art was. Although his realm had not changed, if he could cultivate the slaughter sword art, Chu Fengmian's strength would increase by at least 50%. This was not impossible. After all, the limit of the slaughter sword art was beyond the heaven level. It was much stronger than most of the sword arts in the world. It was definitely one of the most powerful sword techniques in the world. If it weren't for the fact that cultivating the slaughter sword art was a crime against heaven and reason, Chu Fengmian would have done so long ago. Now that he had the chance, there There was no way he would pass it up. The two Xiantian realm demonlings had been easily slaughtered by Chu Fengmian, and the remaining demonlings were so terrified that they didn't dare to approach him. However, there was no way Chu Fengmian was going to let the blood and qi slip by. Every time the sword in his hand flashed, it was enough to kill several demonic beasts. Chu Fengmian devoured a large amount of blood qi and fused it into his sword of slaughter. 5 days passed. During that time, it was impossible to say how many demonlings Chu Fengmian had killed. By this point, the forest was littered with corpses. Whether they were in the air or on the ground, Chu Fengmian killed every single demonling he could find. The murderous intent on Chu Fengmian's body had already reached its peak, making him look like a god of death. There were tens of thousands of wind control realm demonlings, so many that Chu Fengmian couldn't even find them on his own. Thanks to Grand Emperor Richlush's examination, Chu Fengmian had benefited greatly from the fact that he had successfully cultivated the slaughter sword art. Now that he had mastered the slaughter sword art, he was confident that he would be able to take on people like young Sir Flame South, Chu Ning, and Chung Tiankong without using the rich lush steel. And if he used the rich lush steel, he might even be able to take on Jiling Tian. If he could cultivate Chu Fengmian's slaughter sword art to greater mastery, he was confident that he could easily crush and kill even Jiling Tian. However, it was easier said than done to cultivate the massacre sword principle to the great accomplishment stage. Chu Fengmian had killed tens of thousands of demonlings, but he hadn't even reached the level of minor success. In fact, it seemed impossible for him to reach the level of major success. He would have to kill demon gods or sages who had reached the level of god power. If Chu Fengmian was that strong, he could crush Jiling Tian with a single finger. There's no need to think too much about it, Chu Fengmian thought. The most important thing right now is to reach the level of minor success with the slaughter sword art. Then I'll have a new trump card. With that, Chu Fengmian was confident that he would be able to kill young Sir Flame South, Chu Ning, and Chung Tiankong even without using the rich lush steel. Chu Fengmian was determined to kill these 3 people. They wanted to kill Chu Fengmian and even force him into a desperate situation. Chu Fengmian wouldn't be happy if he didn't kill them. His figure once again shuttled back and forth in the forest, looking for other hidden demonic beasts to continue killing. Another day passed. Almost all the demonic beasts in the space had been killed by Chu Fengmian. Among the countless demonic beasts, there was only one left. A thunderhawk. Chu Fengmian looked up into the sky. This was the last remaining demonic beast, which was also the most powerful one in this space. It was a thunderhawk, a demonling that was at the peak of the Windgate realm. This thunderhawk was a demonling that was born from the innate thunder soul. It wasn't a spirit of the 5 elements, but it was stronger than the spirits of the 5 elements. It was much stronger than the primordial dragon turtle from 1,000 years ago. This thunderhawk strength is probably on par with Chu Ning and Chung Tiankong. After killing it, my slaughter sword art will reach the level of minor success. Chu Fengmian's slaughter sword art had reached a bottleneck, and he needed to kill more powerful demonlings. This thunderhawk was the perfect sacrifice for Chu Fengmian's slaughter sword art to the level of minor success. Get down here. Chu Fengmian raised his head and roared. His roar was like a dragon's roar. Chapter 205. A dragon's roar resounded across the sky. Lei Ying's mind went blank when he heard the dragon's roar. Then, he fell from the sky. The dragon's roar was enough to stun Lei Ying for a second. Then, his body fell down involuntarily. The ancient war dragon was the emperor of demons. The sudden dragon's roar was enough to stun countless demonic beasts. As Chu Fengmian cultivated the war dragon skill, he condensed more ancient war dragon blood essence. Now, Chu Fengmian's dragon's roar was incomparable to that of a real ancient war dragon. However, it was still comparable to a true dragon's roar. This dragon's roar was enough to stun the Thunder Eagle for about a second. Unless it was a demonic beast above the divine force realm, Chu Fengmian's dragon's roar was enough to stun it. Dragon's roar? Human, seems like you have the bloodline of a true dragon. Lei Ying woke up and looked at Chu Fengmian. Then, he spoke in an ear-piercing voice. Today, I'll devour you. I'll also be able to obtain your bloodline and improve myself. Lei Ying's thoughts were exactly the same as the real Lei Ying. Looking at Chu Fengmian, his eyes were filled with greed. Chu Fengmian wanted to kill him and obtain Lei Ying's blood. Lei Ying also wanted to kill Chu Fengmian and devour Chu Fengmian's bloodline. The bloodline of a true dragon was definitely a great supplement for demonic beasts. Kill! Chu Fengmian's eyes turned cold. Without further ado, he slashed at Lei Ying with the scarlet flame sword. The blood in the sky turned into blood-red swords and slashed at Lei Ying's body. Boom! Lei Ying sneered. Countless thunderbolts were spat out from his mouth. The thunderbolts intertwined with the blood-red swords. Boom! 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 Countless sounds of collisions and explosions rang out. Countless trees in the forest were blasted into smithereens by the collision of the two forces. Lei Ying's strength is indeed extraordinary. It's worthy of being an inborn demonic beast. When Chu Fengmian saw the thunderbolts that filled the sky from the Thunder Eagle's mouth, a serious look appeared on his face. However, even if Lei Ying's strength was comparable to Chu Fengmian's, his spiritual energy was far from being as robust as Chu Fengmian's. The sword in Chu Fengmian's hand didn't seem to need any spiritual power. Countless sword qi shot out one after another. Even a saint might not be able to withstand such a crazy outburst of sword qi, but it was extremely easy for Chu Fengmian. On the other hand, Lei Ying wasn't as crazy as Chu Fengmian. Every thunderbolt he spat out consumed his own spiritual energy. After a few rounds, Chu Fengmian's offensive did not decrease, but the Thunder Eagle was unable to withstand it. Die! Chu Fengmian roared furiously, and a 100-meter-long blood-red sword qi, filled with boundless blood qi, slashed towards the Thunderhawk. This terrifying attack was like the descent of the god of death. It forcefully slashed the body of the Thunder Eagle, causing his body to fall from the sky rapidly. Countless blood qi seeped out from the wound on the Thunderhawk's body. Devour! Chu Fengmian waved his hand, and all the blood qi in the Thunderhawk's body was absorbed by Chu Fengmian. The blood qi was equivalent to the blood qi of hundreds of demonic beasts like the white sand tiger combined. This sword art of massacre is terrifying to the extreme. If I hadn't cultivated this sword art of massacre, I would have been able to fight the Thunder Eagle to a draw. If I want to kill him, I'll have to use the richly lush monument. But now that I've cultivated this sword art of massacre, it's enough to kill Lei Ying. Chu Fengmian looked at Lei Ying's corpse, and with a wave of his hand, he swept up countless blood qi and infused it into the sword art of massacre. This time, Chu Fengmian felt that the sword art of massacre had begun to change. The blood qi and killing intent within it had become much purer. The blood-red color within it had also become much deeper. Chu Fengmian understood that this was the result of his sword art of massacre finally reaching minor completion. Massacre of the human realm. Chu Fengmian picked up the scarlet flame sword and slashed at the forest on the ground. A blood-red sword light that was 500 to 600 meters long slashed down, and a 20-meter wide fissure appeared on the ground, extending for 1,000 meters. Countless trees on the ground were destroyed by this sword. The power of this sword strike was several times stronger than before. This was the power of someone who had cultivated the sword art of massacre to minor completion. Good. With this sword art of massacre, even if I don't use the richly lush monument, dealing with young Master Yin Nan, Chu Ning, and the others won't be a problem, Chu Fengmian said proudly. Although the richly lush monument was powerful, it couldn't be used frequently. Although Chu Fengmian had obtained a lot of wealth from the tomb, he couldn't just squander it. After all, this was the only chance to make a fortune in the tomb, so Chu Fengmian had to cherish it. Although the sword art of massacre wasn't as powerful as the richly lush monument, Chu Fengmian was very familiar with it. After all, he was a sword cultivator, and his weapon of choice was the sword. No matter how powerful the richly lush monument was, it wasn't suitable for Chu Fengmian and could only be used as a trump card. Especially in the future, when the sword art of massacre was upgraded, its power would definitely surpass that of the richly lush monument. Now that Chu Fengmian had mastered the sword art of massacre, it would definitely be worth 10 drops of ancient battle dragon blood essence. With such strength, Chu Fengmian would truly have the ability to contend with Crown Prince Zhi Lingtian. Chu Fengmian still remembered clearly how Zhi Lingtian had ambushed Chu Fengmian during the assessment. When he had enough strength, the first thing he would do was to kill Zhi Lingtian. Then he would destroy the Cheng clan and family Chu, the two great clans of Wusheng Academy. 6 days passed. Chu Fengmian had spent a total of 6 days in the third gate, and the countless demonic beasts had all been killed by Chu Fengmian. Not a single one was left alive. In front of Chu Fengmian, the fourth gate was already open. Initially, the fourth gate would only open after 7 days. However, all the demonic beasts had been slain. The fourth door had already been opened in advance. Chu Fengmian had benefited immensely from the third gate, and had even cultivated the sword art of massacre to minor completion. This made him even more eager to find out what the fourth gate's test would be like. Although the tests were extremely dangerous, they were also filled with opportunities. Chapter 206. Lightning. As soon as Chu Fengmian stepped through the fourth door, he sensed countless bolts of lightning shooting toward him. These bolts of lightning were completely different from the flames in the second door. They weren't illusory, they were real. All of a sudden, countless bolts of lightning shot toward Chu Fengmian. Rumble. Chu Fengmian's eyes flickered, and he waved his hand, sending out a stream of spiritual power to block the lightning. However, the lightning seemed endless, and it slammed into Chu Fengmian's spiritual power barrier. What exactly is the purpose of this fourth test? Chu Fengmian murmured to himself as he looked around. As of this moment, he could tell that each of the 5 gates set up by Grand Emperor Rich Lush had its own purpose and logic. Rather than calling them tests, they were more like tempering exercises for martial artists. The first door tested the temperament and wisdom of a martial artist. If one's mind wasn't strong enough, they wouldn't be able to pass the first door. However, if they passed, they would be able to slay their heart devils ahead of time, which was a huge opportunity for any martial artist. In other words, they would be able to solve one of the most difficult problems in the God Power level, and would be of great help to them in the future. And the test of the second door was to test a martial artist's ability to deal with illusions. The test of the third gate was to test a warrior's ability to survive. No matter how strong a warrior was, there would be a day when they would be hunted down endlessly. The third door was designed to make martial artists experience what it was like to be hunted down. However, Chu Fengmian had God power, so he wasn't afraid of being hunted down. In fact, he could use the demonlings to practice his sword techniques. Perhaps not even Grand Emperor Rich Lush could have guessed that he would pass the test in such a way. As for the fourth test, it was obvious that he had set up the lightning for a reason. It seems this lightning can temper the body. Chu Fengmian sensed the lightning within, but discovered that the power of the lightning wasn't extremely ferocious. Instead, it was as if it had been deliberately suppressed. Most likely, Grand Emperor Rich Lush had taken the lightning, and then left it behind after weakening it. Although it wasn't something that could be ignored, it wasn't impossible to fight it with spiritual power. Lightning tempering one's body was a method used by some of the Almighties in ancient times. It was said that there were many ancient Almighties who, in order to refine their bodies, would wait for a thunderstorm. Then, they would rush directly into the thunderclouds and use the lightning to refine their bodies. Of course, this kind of action was simply crazy to the extreme. Even if a saint came, it would be impossible for him to resist the lightning with his physical body. Only those terrifying ancient Almighties could do so. Now, the power of these thunderbolts in front of him was probably less than 1% of the real thunderbolts. However, it was indeed just right for a wind-controlling realm martial artist who could use its power to temper his body. Understanding this, Chu Fengmian no longer used his spiritual energy to resist. Instead, he used his body to rush out. Countless bolts of lightning washed over Chu Fengmian's body, causing his flesh to begin to burn. Numbness filled Chu Fengmian's body. Good. These lightning bolts are indeed enough to temper my body. Chu Fengmian laughed loudly. He fully activated the ancient battle dragon blood essence in his body. The power of the 10 drops of ancient battle dragon blood essence was squeezed to the extreme and burst out. The burn scars on his body suddenly looked brand new. The damage caused by the lightning bolts was restored by Chu Fengmian's spiritual energy. This back and forth was equivalent to Chu Fengmian constantly tempering his body at every moment. If other martial artists were to come, they would be far from being able to do what Chu Fengmian did. Generally, a martial artist's body would not be able to bear it after 5 minutes of tempering. They would have to use their strength to resist for a period of time and swallow spiritual herbs to recover before continuing the tempering. However, Chu Fengmian's recovery ability was abnormal to a frightening extent. As long as he was not dead, he could recover overnight. Moreover, such a small injury could be recovered in an instant. After a while, Chu Fengmian felt that when the lightning bolts fell again, there was no longer that numbness. Chu Fengmian's body had already been tempered. It was many times tougher than before. The thunderbolts that fell were no longer of much significance to Chu Fengmian. They could no longer temper his body. It seems I'll have to attract even more lightning. Chu Fengmian looked up at the thunderclouds, then blurred into motion and shot toward them. As soon as Chu Fengmian flew into the air, countless thunderbolts sensed his existence. Countless thunderbolts condensed into a lightning dragon and roared at Chu Fengmian. Grand Emperor Richlush used his spiritual power to refine this lightning. It's much gentler than before. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Laughing heartily, Chu Fengmian charged toward the lightning dragon. Only someone like Grand Emperor Richlush would do such a thing to his successor. Of course, Yang Qi didn't think that Yang Qi would do such a thing to Grand Emperor Richlush. Not even the geniuses of the 7 great sects would receive such treatment. After all, capturing lightning wasn't an easy task. True lightning was hundreds of times stronger than this, perhaps even thousands of times stronger. Now that Chu Fengmian saw the lightning, he realized that he had underestimated Grand Emperor Richlush's power. In fact, Grand Emperor Richlush had been far stronger than the rumors had made him out to be. Crackle! Countless thunderbolts exploded on Chu Fengmian's body. Layers of thunderbolts washed over his body like an ocean. Chu Fengmian's body was riddled with thousands of wounds, but thanks to the power of his bloodline, he was able to heal them quickly. Injuries could be healed, but the pain was unavoidable. That said, if he had the opportunity to temper his body, then a bit of pain was nothing. Thanks to the Battle Dragon incantation, Chu Fengmian's body was far tougher than that of ordinary martial artists. Thanks to the lightning bolts, Chu Fengmian's body was growing stronger with each passing moment. Before long, the lightning dragon was no longer able to do anything to Chu Fengmian. If I want to get stronger, I'll have to get to the center of the lightning. Chapter 207. Chu Fengmian's figure suddenly rushed into the thundercloud. He came to the core of countless thunderbolts. The thunderbolts all over the sky turned into thunder dragons, roaring and bombarding Chu Fengmian at the same time. Come on, the more thunderbolts there are, the stronger my body will be. Chu Fengmian laughed loudly, urging the bloodline in his body to the extreme, allowing the thunderbolts to strike Chu Fengmian's body. Chu Fengmian's body was gradually broken under the impact of the thunderbolts, but it soon recovered little by little. His body seemed to be constantly repeating the process of being destroyed by the thunderbolts and then being reformed and restored. A day passed. Chu Fengmian's body was no longer in a sorry state, but under the impact of the thunderbolts, Chu Fengmian still closed his eyes and resisted with all his strength. 2 days passed. Chu Fengmian's expression had become much more relaxed. Although his body was still extremely numb because of the thunderbolts, his whole body had already shown a kind of bronze color. This was the appearance of Chu Fengmian's body, after being broken and reborn again and again, becoming more and more condensed. 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. Until the 6th day, the thunderbolts all over the sky could no longer cause any harm to Chu Fengmian. He walked among the thunderbolts, which could not even be counted as a tickle to Chu Fengmian. He did not feel anything at all. Now, with such a body, I'm afraid that even without using my strength, it's enough to fight with some martial artists of 7th or 8th level of the Imperial Wind Realm. Chu Fengmian looked at his body and sighed. The ability of the thunderbolt body refining was indeed very powerful. It was enough to make Chu Fengmian's body stronger every time it was torn and reformed. Now, the thunderbolts are meaningless. Chu Fengmian looked at the thunderbolts in front of him, suddenly stretched out his hand, grabbed it, and tore it apart. Great! Boom! With a loud sound, the thundercloud was torn apart by Chu Fengmian's bare hands. Behind the thundercloud, the last gate, the fifth gate, also appeared. It was as Chu Fengmian had guessed. The key to passing this test was to pass the thunderbolt body refining. It's the last level. Chu Fengmian knew that this final gate would be the final test. Whether or not he could acquire the legacy of Grand Emperor Richlush would depend on this one step. In the test of the 5 gates, everyone would enter an independent space. Therefore, Chu Fengmian wasn't sure if there would be anyone like him who would pass the last test. Go! The legacy of Grand Emperor Richlush is definitely mine. A confident smile appeared on Chu Fengmian's face as he muttered to himself. His figure once again entered the 5th door. The 5th gate was surprisingly calm. Chu Fengmian entered. In front of him was a huge platform. On the platform, a figure stood quietly with his hands behind his back. It looked like he was waiting for Chu Fengmian. You've come. As expected, you're the only one who can pass my test. That figure was none other than Grand Emperor Richlush, and he was the one who called out to Chu Fengmian. That said, I never would have guessed that you didn't even use the Richlush steel in the first 4 tests. According to my calculations, with the help of the Richlush steel, it shouldn't be difficult for you to pass the trials of the first 4 doors. But you didn't use the Richlush steel, and yet you made it this far. It seems I underestimated you. Grand Emperor Richlush's voice was filled with surprise. Based on his calculations, Chu Fengmian really did have the best chance of passing the 5th gate. Yet, he could never have guessed that Chu Fengmian would make it this far without using the Richlush steel. He had assumed that, at the very least, Chu Fengmian would have to use the Richlush steel in the face of the tens of thousands of demonlings at the 3rd gate. Never in his wildest dreams could he have guessed that Chu Fengmian would take advantage of the opportunity to cultivate his sword technique. To someone as powerful as Grand Emperor Richlush, there were very few things that could surprise him. And yet, Chu Fengmian had done something completely unexpected. So, no one else passed the test. Chu Fengmian asked, looking at Grand Emperor Richlush. According to what Grand Emperor Richlush had just said, Chu Fengmian was the only one who had passed the first 4 gates. That meant that young Sir Flame South, Chu Ning, Cheng Tiankong, and the others had all failed. That's right, Grand Emperor Richlush said coldly. They all failed. Only 3 made it to the 3rd gate, and 1 made it to the 4th. Unfortunately, he failed. Grand Emperor Richlush said coldly. 3 made it to the 3rd gate, and 4 made it to the 4th. Although Chu Fengmian had been surprised by the results, he wasn't too surprised. The first 2 gates weren't really tests for martial artists. They were tests of temperament, and not of strength. The test of the 3rd gate was an absolute test of one's strength. The number of people who failed this test was definitely not a small number. What was surprising to Chu Fengmian was that someone had actually made it to the 4th gate. Senior, may I ask who made it to the 4th gate? Chu Fengmian asked respectfully. Anyone who made it to the 4th gate, even if they failed, would have benefited immensely. Once they left the Holy Land, their future prospects would be limitless. Therefore, Chu Fengmian had to be very careful. It's the Holy Child you were talking about, Grand Emperor Richlush said calmly. Holy Child, Grand Emperor Richlush said calmly. He's strong, but the technique he cultivates is crooked and crooked. He couldn't stand up to the lightning, and was defeated by the 4th gate. I can't believe it's a Holy Child. Chu Fengmian hadn't expected that to happen at all. He had assumed that Chu Ning, Cheng Tiankong, and young Sir Flame South would make it to the 4th gate. The strength of the 3 of them should be the strongest among everyone present. Young Sir Flame South was too weak and had been defeated by the 1st gate. Therefore, Chu Fengmian had assumed that either Chu Ning or Cheng Tiankong would make it to the 4th gate. Who could have guessed that would be a Holy Child? The Holy Child's cultivation level wasn't very high, and he was only in the 3rd or 4th division of the wind control realm. The fact that he had made it to the 4th gate proved that he was far stronger than Chu Fengmian had imagined. It seems that Holy Child will be a big problem after leaving the Holy Land. Chapter 208. Chu Fengmian sighed inwardly. Thankfully, the Holy Sun cultivated the Heart Devil slaughtering incantation, which was definitely a technique from the wretched Tao. Lightning was the ultimate power of Yang, and was the bane of wretched techniques. Otherwise, the Holy Sun would have been in the same situation as Chu Fengmian. After passing through the 4th gate, Chu Fengmian arrived at the 5th gate. Of course, the Holy Sun had already passed the first 3 gates, which meant that he must have benefited greatly. In the future, he would definitely be a formidable opponent for Chu Fengmian. Senior, may I ask what the test for the 5th gate is? Chu Fengmian calmed his mind and temporarily stopped thinking about other things. Instead, he focused all of his attention on the examination in front of him. The test of the 5th gate was the last test. However, it should also be the most difficult test. If Chu Fengmian passed, he would be able to acquire the legacy of Grand Emperor Rich Lush. But if he failed, he would be left with nothing. Therefore, Chu Fengmian had no choice but to get serious. Test? The test for the 5th gate is simple. You just have to defeat me. Grand Emperor Rich Lush laughed heartily. If you can't defeat me, what qualifications do you have to acquire my legacy? What? Chu Fengmian's pupils constricted. Defeat Grand Emperor Rich Lush? Although this Grand Emperor Rich Lush was only a projection, he still had the power of a sage. Even if Chu Fengmian were 10 times as strong, he still wouldn't be able to defeat him. This test wasn't something that could be passed by mere mortals. Could it be that Grand Emperor Rich Lush had set up this test to toy with people? Even as Chu Fengmian's mind raced, Grand Emperor Rich Lush saw the expression on his face and laughed loudly. Of course, I'm not asking you to defeat me. Considering how strong you are, even if I'm just a projection, you're still far from being a match for me. What I want to test is your understanding of martial skills. I'll pass on to you the most powerful martial skill I've ever used to dominate the 9 realms, the Rich Lush Megaplexus Palm. I'll suppress my power to the same level as you. After that, if you can understand the Rich Lush Megaplexus Palm to 70%, you'll be able to defeat me. Whether or not you pass the test will depend on your ability to understand the martial skill. Without it, you won't qualify to be my successor, said Grand Emperor Rich Lush proudly. The reason he set up so many tests was to test the cultivators who were truly capable of inheriting his power. Aptitude, temperament, intelligence, and strength. Not a single one could be missing. A powerful person like him had extremely strict requirements for his disciples. Comprehending a martial technique? This test wasn't that hard to understand. However, the Lush Grand Luo Palm was a type of palm technique. As for Chu Fengmian, as a sword cultivator, he had never studied palm techniques in his previous life. Therefore, his various experiences in his previous life were completely meaningless. This king will give you 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, this king will make his move. All of a sudden, an image appeared in Chu Fengmian's mind. These are the images of the bountiful heaven palm. With that, Grand Emperor Rich Lush suppressed his power to the peak of the wind control realm, which was roughly the same level as Chu Fengmian. After all the tests, Grand Emperor Rich Lush knew exactly how strong Chu Fengmian was and knew exactly how strong he was. Rich Lush Great Net Palm. Chu Fengmian said, closing his eyes and recalling everything he knew about the Rich Lush Great Net Palm. The Rich Lush Great Net Palm was a martial technique that Grand Emperor Rich Lush had created when he was at his peak and was considered a supreme grade Earth-class technique. In terms of power, it was close to the level of a heavenly class martial technique. What a powerful palm technique! Chu Fengmian couldn't help but sigh in admiration. Many of the powerful martial techniques that existed today had been created in ancient times when the martial Tao was flourishing. In the present age, there were some experts who could create low-grade, Earth-class martial techniques and could be considered grandmasters of the martial Tao. People like Grand Emperor Rich Lush, who could create supreme-grade, Earth-class martial techniques, were extremely rare. Even in the 7 great sects, People like him were revered. Grand Emperor Richlush really was a grandmaster of the martial Tao. As Chu Fengyan looked at the rich, lush, great net palm, he couldn't help but frown. It was almost the same as what he had imagined. Chu Fengyan could be said to know nothing about palm techniques. In just 10 minutes, Chu Fengyan was afraid that Chu Fengyan could only use palm techniques. He might not even be able to unleash 10% of its power, much less 70%. Is there really no other way? Chu Fengyan thought anxiously. If he failed this final test, everything would be for naught. Palm technique. If I can't cultivate it, then what about changing it? Chu Fengyan's mind was filled with countless ideas. Since he didn't have any advantage in cultivating palm techniques, why didn't he change his palm techniques? The rich, lush, great net palm was the culmination of all of Grand Emperor Richlush's martial disciplines. Of course, what suited Grand Emperor Richlush didn't necessarily suit Chu Fengyan. Chu Fengyan could change it into something that suited him better. And so he did. Pulling out the scarlet flame sword, Chu Fengyan poured the power of the rich, lush, great net palm into the tip of the sword. Next, Chu Fengyan drew on his spirit power, creating a new martial skill. What Chu Fengyan wanted to do was create a new martial skill based on Grand Emperor Richlush's palm. When it came to palm techniques, Chu Fengyan didn't know anything about them. But when it came to sword techniques, few people in the world could compare to him. Therefore, he wanted to fuse the power of the rich, lush, great net palm into his sword technique, creating a new one that would suit Chu Fengyan. Creating a new sword technique? Grand Emperor Richlush could tell what Chu Fengyan was thinking and was visibly startled. Chu Fengyan was actually trying to create a new sword technique based on the rich, lush, great net palm. Creating martial techniques and swordsmanship was something that could only be done by martial artists who were at least saints. Only when one's strength reached saints could one truly comprehend the true essence of martial arts. However, among the 10 saints, there was probably less than one who could create a martial sword technique. Less than 1 in 10 could create a martial sword technique. That was something that required a profound understanding of the martial path. Chapter 209. It was completely unheard of and unheard of. What's more, it was done in just 10 minutes. Even the weakest martial arts expert would need months, years, or even centuries to create a sword art martial skill. Creating a sword technique in just 10 minutes? Was he the former lord of the sword Tao? Grand Emperor Richlush stared at Chu Fengyan but didn't say anything. He wanted to see if Chu Fengyan could succeed. After all, Chu Fengyan had done so many incredible things. Perhaps he would be able to surprise Grand Emperor Richlush again. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Chu Fengyan stood motionless in the same place. Only the power of the sword in his hand was constantly changing. The power of the rich, lush megaplexus palm was already fusing with Chu Fengyan's sword. Don't tell me he's actually going to succeed? Grand Emperor Richlush thought, his heart pounding with shock. The fact that Chu Fengyan could fuse the power of the rich, lush megaplexus palm into his sword indicated that he might actually succeed. Using the power of the rich, lush megaplexus palm to create a new sword technique. 10 minutes passed in the blink of an eye. Finally, a smile appeared on Chu Fengyan's face. He had succeeded. The power of the rich, lush megaplexus palm was now fully infused into his sword. Of course, Chu Fengyan wasn't sure exactly how much power he would be able to unleash. After all, Grand Emperor Richlush's test wasn't about him learning the rich, lush megaplexus palm. Instead, he had to understand 70% of the power of the rich, lush megaplexus palm. Chu Fengyan wasn't sure if he could do that. Only actual combat would be able to confirm that. 10 minutes are up, Grand Emperor Richlush megaplexus palm said. Your latent talent really puts me to shame. 10 minutes is enough for you to create a new martial technique. It can be said that you're the most monstrous genius this king has ever seen. Grand Emperor Richlush didn't try to hide his praise for Chu Fengyan. In the past, he had dominated the 9 realms and had seen countless geniuses. However, none of them could compare to Chu Fengyan. To be honest, I also want to see how powerful the swordsmanship you create can be if you are given enough time. Grand Emperor Rich Lush's voice turned cold and serious. However, rules are rules. 10 minutes have passed. If you can unleash more than 70% of the power of the bountiful heaven palm, you will pass the test. All of my legacies are yours. However, if you're unable to unleash your full potential, all of this inheritance will have nothing to do with you. Grand Emperor Rich Lush's voice was extremely cold. I will suppress my power to the same level as yours. Make your move. All right, Chu Fumian answered resolutely. Without any hesitation, he shot toward Grand Emperor Rich Lush. Above the sword in his hand, there was an incomparably dense energy that swept out crazily. Grand Emperor Rich Lush's Rich Lush Megaplexus Palm was a martial technique that required immense amounts of spiritual power. His palm strike was like a huge mountain pressing down on everyone. As a result, the new martial technique that Chu Fumian had created with the richly endowed palm was the same. Its spiritual energy was chaotic to the extreme. Combined with the Scarlet Flame Sword, it was the purest and most powerful sword attack. And yet, as far as Grand Emperor Rich Lush was concerned, it was weak and powerless. Is the sword principle that you have comprehended so powerful? Grand Emperor Rich Lush looked at Chu Fumian and shook his head, as if he weren't very satisfied. This level of power isn't even 30% of the Rich Lush Megaplexus Palm's power. It seems I'll have to show you the true power of the Rich Lush Megaplexus Palm. Even as the words left his mouth, a stream of spiritual power began to form in the palm of his hand. Then, he unleashed a palm strike toward Chu Fumian. Rumble. A massive boom rang out as boundless spiritual power slammed into Chu Fumian. If Chu Fumian's sword could be likened to a mountain, then Grand Emperor Rich Lush's Rich Lush Grand Net Palm could be likened to a chain of mountains. It was like a mountain range with no end in sight. Countless overlapping and enormous spiritual energies rushed toward Chu Fumian and bombarded him continuously. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Chu Fumian was sent flying dozens of meters away as he spat out a mouthful of blood. The power of that palm strike was terrifying to the extreme. If it weren't for the fact that Chu Fumian's body had been tempered by lightning during the fourth trial, he wouldn't have been able to withstand it. That palm strike would have been more than enough to shatter Chu Fumian. What a powerful palm strike! Chu Fumian thought, shaken. After seeing Grand Emperor Rich Lush use the Rich Lush Megaplexus Palm with his own eyes, he finally understood. How shallow was his understanding of the Rich Lush Megaplexus Palm strike? Chu Fumian's sword didn't even have 30% of the power behind it. If you don't have any other tricks up your sleeve, you'll definitely lose this fight. Grand Emperor Rich Lush stood there, not attacking. Instead, he looked at Chu Fumian. Sword, Chu Fumian said, sending another stream of spiritual power into the tip of his sword. After seeing Grand Emperor Rich Lush use the Rich Lush Megaplexus Palm with his own eyes, he suddenly realized something. The power of mountains was the quintessence of the Rich Lush Megaplexus Palm. No matter how big a mountain was, it couldn't possibly be heavier than a chain of mountains. Again, Grand Emperor Rich Lush's eyes flickered with disappointment when he saw Chu Fumian attack again. The fact that he didn't attack again meant that he wanted to give Chu Fumian some time to comprehend the situation. Obviously, he assumed that Chu Fumian had given up on himself. After all, in the face of such immense power, he didn't have the slightest bit of confidence that he could win. Rumble. Gathering more spiritual power, Grand Emperor Rich Lush unleashed another palm strike. The moment his palm collided with Chu Fumian's sword, Chu Fumian's sword disappeared in an instant. However, this time, Chu Fumian only retreated less than 10 steps. He also didn't spit out blood like before. 50% of the power. Grand Emperor Rich Lush's eyes flickered with shock. This time, Chu Fumian's sword strike was close to 50% of the power of the Rich Lush Megaplexus Palm. Although it was still a far cry from the 70% he had expected from Grand Emperor Rich Lush Megaplexus Palm, it was still shocking. Chapter 210. The interval between these two strikes was less than a minute. Chu Fumian had gained even more insight into the quintessence of the Rich Lush Megaplexus Palm. If things went on like this, Chu Fengmian might actually be able to create a sword technique with 70% of the power of the rich, lush megaplexus palm. 50%? Not enough. Calming himself, Chu Fengmian sent another stream of spirit power into the tip of his sword. This time, the condensed spiritual energy was even more powerful than the previous time. Sword techniques were something that could only be achieved through repeated tempering. Although Chu Fengmian had been forced back by Grand Emperor Richlush's palm strike, he was still able to do so. However, he had already memorized the power of the rich, lush megaplexus palm. Once again, he sent his sword slashing toward Grand Emperor Richlush. Boom! Palm and sword met again, and this time, the expression on Grand Emperor Richlush's face couldn't even be described as shock. It was as if he were looking at a monster. 60%. Chu Fengmian's third sword strike was already close to 60% of the power of the rich, lush megaplexus palm. This time, the power of the palm and the sword was enough to force Chu Fengmian to take 3 steps back. The power was easily neutralized by Chu Fengmian. Again, Chu Fengmian didn't hesitate and sent out another sword strike. Boom! This time, when the sword in Chu Fengmian's hand flashed, it was like an endless mountain range. Endless spiritual energy came crashing down with a loud bang. Grand Emperor Rich Lush gathered spirit power in his hand and sent out another palm strike. But this time, Chu Fengmian stood where he was without moving at all. He was not affected by the power at all. 70%. Now that Chu Fengmian was on par with Grand Emperor Rich Lush, his control of the Rich Lush megaplexus palm had reached 70%. You really didn't disappoint me. From a look in Grand Emperor Richlush's eyes, it was obvious that he was praising him. Creating a sword technique with 70% of the power of the Rich Lush megaplexus palm was much more difficult than learning it directly. Chu Fengmian's sword technique was at least as powerful as a high-grade Earth-class technique. Even some great sages would feel ashamed of their inferiority. It's not over yet. Chu Fengmian's eyes flickered with a smile. Moments ago, he had been fighting back against Grand Emperor Richlush's palm. All of a sudden, another wave of even more powerful spiritual energy erupted. Not even Grand Emperor Richlush could have guessed that the spirit power would suddenly attack him. What? Hidden force. Chu Fengmian's sword actually contained a hidden force. That was something that could only be achieved by someone who had at least 90% of the power of the Rich Lush palm. In such a short period of time, Chu Fengmian had created a sword art that could match 70% of the power of the Rich Lush palm. This was already the limit of a genius. Even a saint couldn't compare to Chu Fengmian. To be able to reach 90% of the power of the bountiful Lush palm, Grand Emperor Rich Lush could never have guessed that someone could do something like this. Grand Emperor Rich Lush finally reacted, unleashing a burst of spirit power to block the incoming attack. That said, Grand Emperor Rich Lush was able to unleash all of the power he had been suppressing. "I admit defeat," Grand Emperor Rich Lush said. Grand Emperor Rich Lush looked at Chu Fengmian and sighed. This sigh was filled with an indescribable sense of dejection. Grand Emperor Rich Lush had once dominated the 9 realms, and even if he had suppressed his power to the same level as Chu Fengmian, he should have been able to defeat him easily. But the hidden force just now had come so suddenly that Grand Emperor Rich Lush had been completely caught off guard. He had been forced to use all the power he could to block it. As a result, the agreement he had made with Grand Emperor Rich Lush had been broken. To be able to create a sword art like this, Grand Emperor Rich Lush murmured to himself. Not even the former Lord of the Sword Tao could do something like this when he was young. Grand Emperor Rich Lush looked over at Chu Fengmian. "Perhaps you'll become the new paragon of the Sword Tao. Now that I've given you my legacy, I've fulfilled my lifelong wish." Grand Emperor Rich Lush's voice was filled with dejection. Now that someone had completed his test, it was time for the projection of Grand Emperor Rich Lush to fade away. After all, the projection had been a manifestation of Grand Emperor Rich Lush's spirit power, and now it was time for it to fade away. The new paragon of the Sword Tao. Chu Fengmian didn't know what to say in response to Grand Emperor Rich Lush's assessment. The reason he had been able to create a new sword art with a rich, lush megaplexus palm was because of the experiences he had accumulated in his past life. Of course, that was a secret he would never reveal. The truth is, I didn't leave behind many things. Now that you have the rich, lush steel, all of my wealth is yours. Waving his hand, Grand Emperor Richlush tossed an empty ring over. In the future, if the kingdom of martial victory is ever in trouble, do your best to help. After all, it was founded by me. As for the rest, it's nothing. Many thanks, Senior. Chu Fengmian accepted the ring, then bowed his head and expressed his thanks. Chu Fengmian had benefited greatly from Grand Emperor Richlush's test, and now he had his legacy. It was only right for Chu Fengmian to express his thanks. Don't worry about it, Grand Emperor Richlush said with a laugh. Now that you've inherited my legacy, you'll definitely bring it to greater heights in the future. Grand Emperor Richlush laughed heartily. After all, he was a top expert, and in death, the only thing he cared about was his martial arts. Now that he had someone to pass on his martial arts to, it was only natural that he would be overjoyed. This sword art of yours will definitely surpass the rich, lush megaplexus palm in the future. It's time to give it a name. Grand Emperor Richlush looked over at Chu Fengmian. Generally speaking, any martial arts technique that reached the level of the terrestrial class would have a name. The sword art Chu Fengmian had just created was very close to the rich, lush megaplexus palm. Therefore, it was only natural that it would have a name. A name? Chu Fengmian said, his mind spinning. Since this sword art is derived from the rich, lush megaplexus palm and inherits your power, then let's call it Rich Lush. The Rich Lush Sword Art. The Rich Lush Sword Art. Grand Emperor Richlush laughed. Very well. In the future, when you dominate the 9 realms, my name will definitely resound throughout the 9 realms. Even as Grand Emperor Richlush laughed, the illusory image of him began to shatter. Chapter 211. At the same time, Chu Fengmian's figure also returned to the tomb. Only Han Yueli's figure was left in the tomb. Did it work? Han Yueli asked, clearly delighted to see Chu Fengmian back. She had personally watched as the others entered and left. But Chu Fengmian hadn't been teleported out. Did that mean Chu Fengmian had passed Grand Emperor Richlush's test? Not bad. Chu Fengmian nodded as he examined the frigid toxins in Han Yueli's body. Now, the cold poison was beginning to stir. Chu Fengmian spent more than half a month in the assessment of the 5 Great Gates. During that time, Chu Fengmian hadn't been able to use his sword intent to help Han Yueli dispel the toxins. Therefore, he had to get rid of the toxins as quickly as possible. Otherwise, if the toxins spread, not even Chu Fengmian would be able to do anything about it. Sit down, Chu Fengmian said. I'll help you dispel the toxins. Looking at Han Yueli, Chu Fengmian said, I'll dispel the toxins. Chu Fengmian held the 10,000-year-old flame lotus in his hand. On top of the 10,000 years fire lotus, a ball of flame was dancing. It was as if it was alive, revealing the identity of this sacred medicine. All right. Han Yueli hesitated for a moment, then sat down on the ground. After all the time he had spent with Chu Fengmian, he knew that Chu Fengmian wouldn't take back his words. Besides, Han Yueli didn't want to die. Can this 10,000-year-old flame lotus really dispel the toxins in my body? Han Yueli asked, her voice trembling. This was her last chance. Half a month had already passed, and if she didn't succeed, she wouldn't get another chance. Of course, if the 10,000-year-old flame lotus and my skill in medicine can't dispel the toxins, then I won't touch any spirit medicines for the rest of my life. A confident smile appeared on Chu Fengmian's face. This 10,000-year fire lotus was much more potent than he had expected. Even if it was just a low-grade fire-type sacred medicine, Chu Fengmian was 90% confident that would be able to expel the frost poison in Han Yueli's body. Furthermore, the 10,000-year-old flame lotus was a mid-grade holy medicine. It was more than enough to dispel Han Yueli's toxins. Don't be too surprised. Chu Fengmian looked at Han Yueli, a strange smile on his face. A 10,000-year fire lotus, let alone dispelling the cold poison in Han Yueli's body, it was enough to bring her great benefits. The medicinal strength of a sacred medicine was beyond imagination. Han Weili said, Chu Fengyan. She didn't know when it started, but she had started to trust Chu Fengyan unconditionally. Even if her life was at stake, she still chose to trust him unconditionally. Maybe it was when Chu Fengyan didn't abandon her when he was being hunted, or when he exchanged the 10,000-year-old flame lotus for her. Han Weili sat on the ground. Chu Fengyan glanced at the 10,000-year-old flame lotus. Suddenly, he moved his palm and pulled out 5 lotus leaves. They condensed into a ball in Chu Fengyan's hand and turned into spiritual energy. Then, he injected it into Han Weili's body. Almost instantaneously, a bone-piercing chill burst out from Han Weili's body. It was resisting the entry of the spiritual energy. The cold and the hot made Han Weili's body extremely fragile. She suffered great pain and sweat dripped down from her forehead. This poison is really difficult to deal with. Chu Fengyan couldn't help but sigh. The frigid poison seemed to have a mind of its own and was actively resisting the medicinal strength of the 10,000-year-old flame lotus. Fortunately, the medicinal power of the 10,000-year fire lotus was extraordinarily powerful. Soon, the cold poison that was resisting the 10,000-year fire lotus began to shatter, dissolve, and disperse. If this continued, it wouldn't be long before the cold poison in Han Yuli's body was completely expelled. Meanwhile, outside of Grand Emperor Richlush's mausoleum, Chu Fengyan was helping frigid Moon Lily dispel the Han Do from her body. They were none other than the people who had participated in Grand Emperor Richlush's trials in the necropolis, and now they were all gathered outside. Young Sir Flame South Flame, Chu Ning, Chung Tiankong, Ink Ruoxue, Feng Pakshuan, and the Holy Sun were all present. They were all discussing how to deal with Chu Fengyan. It seems that brat Chu Fengyan is the one who got the legacy of Grand Emperor Richlush, young Sir Flame South Flame said. The fact that he hasn't been teleported out of the mausoleum means that he must have already passed the trials. Young Sir Flame South Flame was the first to speak. We've all failed the trials, young Sir Flame South Flame said. That brat took all the treasures left behind by Grand Emperor Richlush. If we let him go, he'll definitely become a huge threat to us. That's right, young Sir Flame South Flame said. Everyone here has a grudge against Chu Fengyan. If we let him go now, we'll be the ones to die. Chu Ning was the first to speak. He knew that Chu Fengyan had the rich, lush tombstone. Even if the others didn't want to deal with Chu Fengyan, he would still choose to deal with Chu Fengyan and take the tombstone from him. Not to mention, he and Chu Fengyan had long been in an irreconcilable relationship. Judging from the fact that he had almost forced Chu Fengyan into a hopeless situation before, Chu Fengyan had already been killed. Given Chu Fengyan's character, he was someone who would seek revenge for the slightest grievance. With such a deep grudge, there was no possibility of reconciliation between him and Chu Fengyan. What's more, he also had a supporter, Chung Tiankong. The two of them were at the peak of the Imperial Wind Realm. It would not be difficult for them to kill Chu Fengyan. That's right, Yang Qi said. Grand Emperor Richlush's treasure storehouse must be filled with boundless wealth. I'm not going to let that brat get the short end of the stick. Chung Tiankong also opened his mouth and echoed Chu Ning's words. Now, I've gathered all of you here to discuss how to deal with that brat Chu Fengyan. Young Master Yan Nan scanned the crowd and said, Chu Fengyan, that brat, is able to have such terrifying strength at the Divine Sea Realm. I'm afraid you can't even imagine how many adventures he has had. As long as we kill him, all his fortune and fortune will belong to us. After Prince Yan Nan finished speaking, his eyes were filled with greed. Just thinking about Chu Feng Mian's fortune and fortune made him extremely excited. I'll be the first to agree to deal with Chu Fengyan. Chu Meng laughed and said. Chapter 2:12. Of course, Chu Ning was referring to the rich lush steel. Although Chu Fengyan had acquired some of Grand Emperor Richlush's treasuries, the most precious of them all was the rich lush steel that Grand Emperor Richlush had personally created. If Chu Ning could get the rich lush steel, he would be invincible under the great sage level. He would even be able to defeat heaven transcendence. Therefore, what he wanted the most was the rich lush steel. It's just a spirit item, Flame Nan Nan said with a laugh. That brat has plenty of wealth. Brother Chu, if you want to deal with him, you can have the first pick. Young Sir Flame South laughed heartily. Chu Fengmian had so much wealth that even if he lost a spirit item, it wouldn't be a big deal. Excellent, young Sir Flame South. Laughing, Chu Ning joined the fray to deal with Chu Fengmian. Count me in. Chung Tiankong chimed in. All right, anyone who wants to join us will get a share of Chu Fengmian's wealth. Young Sir Flame South said happily. He wasn't sure how strong Chu Fengmian was. After all, Chu Fengmian had acquired many treasures from Grand Emperor Rich Lush's mausoleum, as well as his legacy. The more people who joined, the easier it would be to deal with Chu Fengmian. What about you, Holy Sun? What do you think? Seeing that the other three hadn't taken the initiative to speak, young Sir Flame South took the initiative to ask the Holy Sun. The Holy Sun had a grudge with Chu Fengmian, and if he could rope him in, he would have a much better chance of dealing with Chu Fengmian. Of course, if he could rope in more people, he would have one more share of Chu Fengmian's wealth. But the more people he could rope in, the greater his chances of dealing with Chu Fengmian. Considering Chu Fengmian's latent talent, if he got the legacy, he would be even stronger than before. Getting Chu Fengmian's wealth wasn't the most important thing. Killing him was the main reason why young Sir Flame South wanted to rope in so many people. Given the grudge between him and Chu Fengmian, as long as he gave Chu Fengmian the chance, he would definitely kill him. Therefore, he had to kill Chu Fengmian before he grew strong enough. Therefore, it wouldn't hurt to get a larger share of the wealth. Chu Fengmian, the Holy Sun. Chu Fengmian. The saint's eyes flickered as he spoke indifferently. I'm not interested in this matter. I've also gained some benefits from this test. Now, it's more important for me to leave the sacred ground and seek a breakthrough. As for the matter of encircling and killing Chu Fengmian, your strength is more than enough. As the chosen spoke, his figure flashed and he left. Deal with Chu Fengmian? Chu Fengmian's wealth was, of course, very attractive, but there was also a great risk in this matter. The saint had obtained countless benefits from the assessment. He was the one who had benefited the most out of everyone present. Although Chu Fengmian's wealth was tempting, it wasn't worth it for him to risk his life. He was the future master of the black market. Naturally, he didn't want to risk his life to deal with Chu Fengmian. The Holy Sun actually escaped on his own. Young Master Yin Nan snorted coldly. His tone was filled with dissatisfaction. The heart demon killing art cultivated by the saint was enough to cause great trouble for Chu Fengmian if it was used during a siege. That was why young Master Yin Nan had tried to rope the Holy Sun in. Who could have guessed that the Holy Sun wouldn't cooperate with them and would simply leave? Forget it, young Master Yin Nan. With the Holy Sun gone, there's one less person to share the kid's wealth with. Feng Pexian's eyes flickered as he spoke. I don't have any enmity with Chu Fengmian, young Master Yin Nan said. But it's a bit greedy of him to take all of Grand Emperor Rich Lush's treasure. I'm not asking for much. I just want a share of that kid's wealth. What do you say? All right, with Brother Feng's help, we'll have a much easier time dealing with that kid. Young Master Yin Nan nodded in agreement. Feng Pexian's strength was not below theirs. With the addition of Feng Pexian, there were 4 peak Imperial Wind Realm martial artists besieging Chu Fengmian. 4 wind-resisting realm martial artists. Even if Ling Tian came, he would probably be killed. It was impossible for any martial artist below the Saint Realm to be a match for the joint forces of these dead people. As for the last person, the 4 of them couldn't help but look at Imo Ruoxue. Although she didn't have any enmity with Chu Fengmian, they were all aware of his relationship with Han Yueli. Now that she was a disciple of the Frigid Snow Pavilion, no one knew if she would join them in dealing with Chu Fengmian. I wonder if Fairy Mo is interested in dealing with that kid, Chu Fengmian? Young Master Yin Nan asked. If Mo Ruoxue's attitude was ambiguous, it would cause problems in the future. Therefore, it was better to ask her directly. Since Mo Ruoxue was willing to discuss the matter, it was only natural that she had her own plans. Dealing with Chu Fengmian? I'm not interested, Mo Ruoxue said coldly. But as she spoke, she suddenly changed the topic. But since that kid dares to have designs on junior sister Han, he's definitely not a good person. Killing him will prevent him from provoking junior sister Han. This sentence was enough to show Mo Ruoshua's attitude. All right, since Fairy Mo is willing to join us, you'll naturally have a share of Chu Fengmian's wealth. Young Master Yin Nan laughed loudly. In this way, they had 5 martial artists at the peak of the wind-resisting realm. Unless a saint came, Chu Fengmian would definitely die this time. Saints were not allowed to enter the sacred ground. Even Chu Fengmian's master, Saint Xianbei, couldn't save him. Chu Fengmian would definitely die today. Chu Fengmian naturally didn't know what was going on outside. He was still wholeheartedly helping Han Yueli dispel the cold poison in his body. In Chu Fengmian's palm, the medicinal efficacy of the 10,000 years fire lotus was gradually being consumed. Every bit of medicinal efficacy consumed by the 10,000 years fire lotus was dispelling the cold poison in Han Yueli's body. After 2 hours, Chu Fengmian's face was a little pale. The medicinal efficacy of the sacred medicine was enormous. It was extremely taxing to use the medicinal efficacy of the sacred medicine. Moreover, Han Yueli's body was extremely weak because of the cold and the heat. Once Chu Fengmian made a mistake, the strength of the two would be unbalanced. Regardless of whether it was the cold poison in Han Yueli's body or the power of the 10,000 years fire lotus, it was enough to kill Han Yueli on the spot. Chapter 213. Phew. Finally, after another half an hour, Chu Fengmian's serious expression finally relaxed. All the cold poison in Han Yueli's body was finally dispelled. At the same time, the medicinal efficacy of the 10,000 years fire lotus was integrated into Han Yueli's body, causing her strength to rise crazily. Imperial Wind Realm. Under the medicinal efficacy of the 10,000 years fire lotus, Han Yueli's cultivation level suddenly stepped into the Imperial Wind Realm. This 10,000-year fire lotus had less than 20% of its spiritual energy left. It was enough to help Han Yueli step into the wind-controlling realm. This 10,000 years fire lotus is worthy of being a mid-grade sacred medicine. Seeing Han Yueli's breakthrough, Chu Fengmian couldn't help but sigh. Most of the medicinal efficacy of the 10,000 years fire lotus had been used by Chu Fengmian to dispel the cold poison in Han Yueli's body. Now, less than 20% of its power was actually enough to help Han Yueli break through. The medicinal efficacy of sacred medicine was indeed worthy of its reputation. If the power of the 10,000 years fire lotus was completely refined by Han Yueli, her strength might directly reach the peak of the Imperial Wind Realm. She would be on the same level as Prince Yin Nan and Chu Ning. However, if the medicinal efficacy of the 10,000 years fire lotus was not partially consumed by the cold poison in Han Yueli's body, it was not something that Han Yueli could refine. It could be said that it was a blessing in disguise. Although Han Yueli did not gain any benefits from the assessment, the medicinal efficacy of the 10,000 years fire lotus helped her to break through to the Imperial Wind Realm. It was also a great benefit. The cold poison in my body was actually dispelled. Han Yueli stood up and looked at the cold poison in her body. Now that it was completely dispelled, she was still somewhat in disbelief. The terrifying cold poison recorded in the ancient books was actually really dispelled by Chu Fengmian. I said that I would help you dispel the cold poison in your body, and now I have done it. Chu Fengmian looked at Han Yueli, revealing a somewhat confident smile. It seemed that his medical skills had not deteriorated too much, and he was still able to control sacred medicine. Now that you've broken through because of this, it can be considered as a blessing in disguise. Chu Fengmian smiled and said, breaking through from the Divine Sea realm to the Wind Resistance realm was also a small threshold, although it wasn't as exaggerated as breaking through from the Wind Resistance realm to the Divine Force realm. However, it was enough to trap countless cultivators at this step until they died. Now that Han Yueli had entered the Holy Land, it was not as if he had gained nothing. Han Yueli looked at Chu Fengmian with a complicated expression. Han Yueli had seen everything that had happened during this period of time. She was only able to survive because of Chu Fengmian. Now, because of Chu Fengmian, he had profited from a disaster and broken through to the wind-controlling realm. There were some things that could not be concealed. Let's go. Chu Fengmian saw the strange look in Han Yueli's eyes, but he didn't ask. Since Han Yueli didn't want to say, Chu Fengmian wouldn't take the initiative to ask. Wait, Han Yueli glanced at Chu Fengmian and sighed. I have something to tell you. Okay. Chu Fengmian nodded. He also understood that Han Yueli seemed to have been hiding something. Actually, you and I can be considered as enemies. Han Yueli's eyes showed some haze. Actually, I have an engagement with Crown Prince Ji Lingtian. According to the agreement, it should be the day of my wedding with Ji Lingtian, not long after I leave the Holy Land. You have an engagement with Ji Lingtian? Hearing this, a trace of anger flashed in Chu Fengmian's eyes, as if something precious to him had been taken away. He didn't expect that Han Yueli and Ji Lingtian had such a relationship. No wonder Han Yueli said to Chu Fengmian that they were enemies. Chu Fengmian and Ji Lingtian were definitely mortal enemies. In the future, Chu Fengmian would definitely kill Ji Lingtian. Since Han Yueli had an engagement with Ji Lingtian, she was naturally Chu Fengmian's enemy. Yes, the pavilion master of our cold snow pavilion personally made an engagement with Ji Lingtian. Even I can't resist. Han Yueli helplessly showed a trace of a bitter smile. She was the most beautiful woman in Wuxing country and the peerless genius of the cold snow pavilion. But in front of a real expert, she could only be manipulated and couldn't resist. What? The pavilion master of the cold snow pavilion personally made an engagement? Hearing Han Yueli's words, Chu Fengmian couldn't help but frown. This engagement clearly shows that you want to draw Ji Lingtian to your side. Why does your cold snow pavilion have to go through so much trouble to draw Ji Lingtian to your side? In Chu Fengmian's words, there was a hint of confusion. Ji Lingtian was indeed the most dazzling genius in Wuxing country, but for a big sect, a disciple wasn't worth so much effort to draw to their side. Moreover, they even sacrificed Han Yueli. After all, when Han Yueli grew up in the future, she would at least be an inner elder of the cold snow pavilion. They actually wanted to draw Ji Lingtian to their side, even at the expense of Han Yueli. Was Ji Lingtian really so valuable? Of course, a disciple isn't worth the effort of the cold snow pavilion. Although our cold snow pavilion can't compare with Wuxing Academy, it's still one of the 4 big sections. Han Yueli shook her head and said, But a saint is different, said Yi Futian. Saint. These 2 words made Chu Fengmian's eyelids twitch. A saint was a completely different realm from the peak of the wind-controlling realm. A martial artist at the peak of the wind-controlling realm was naturally not worth the effort of the cold snow pavilion. But a saint was different. For example, Wuxing Academy had less than 10 saints in total. As for the 4 big sects, there were even fewer. For example, the cold snow pavilion had 5 saints, which was already considered impressive. A saint was enough to make the power balance between the big sects lose. If Ji Lingtian could break through the divine power realm and become a saint, then the cold snow pavilion's effort to draw him to their side was not without reason. Has Ji Lingtian become a saint? Chu Fengmian couldn't help but ask. It wasn't that easy to break through the wind-controlling realm and become a saint. For example, the ancient dragon turtle had been stuck at the peak of the wind-controlling realm for thousands of years without breaking through. Without Chu Fengmian's help, it would be impossible for him to break through even after 10,000 years. Although it wasn't as difficult for a martial artist to break through as a demonic beast, it wasn't easy either. At least in Chu Fengmian's opinion, Ji Lingtian only had the hope of breaking through to the saint realm. But it would take at least 10 or 20 years to break through. Yet, the cold snow pavilion was trying to draw him to their side. Could it be that Ji Lingtian had already become a saint? Or could it be that there was a 90% chance that he could break through soon? If Lingtian's realm was still at the peak of the wind-controlling realm, Chu Fengmian was confident that he could fight Lingtian. However, if Lingtian became a saint, Chu Fengmian would have to hide to avoid being hunted down. Chapter 214. Given Chu Fengmian's current strength, he wasn't strong enough to fight a saint. Although Ji Lingtian hasn't broken through yet, he should be soon. Han Yueli said. Ji Lingtian found a holy transformation grass in some ruins. He's already at the peak of the wind control realm, so it shouldn't be long before he breaks through to the God Force realm. Holy Transformation Grass. Chu Fumian couldn't help but sigh when he heard the name. Zhi Lingtian truly was blessed with great fortune to have come across such a treasure. Although the Holy Transformation Grass wasn't a sage medicine, its value wasn't the least bit inferior to some low-grade sage medicines. After all, the Holy Transformation Grass had a very simple function. It could allow a peak wind control realm cultivator to break through to the God Force realm, and the probability of breaking through was 100%. Regardless of how talented a peak wind control realm cultivator was, as long as they had the Holy Transformation Grass, they could break through to the God Force realm. Because of that, the Holy Transformation Grass was one of the most valuable spirit medicines in the 9 realms. It could be considered a heaven-sent opportunity. Geniuses like Zhi Lingtian didn't just have incredible talent, they also had great fortune. That was why they could grow so quickly. Chu Fengmian had acquired the Rich Lush steel and the legacy of Grand Emperor Rich Lush. Geniuses with such great fortune were the most difficult to deal with. How long has it been since Zhi Lingtian got the Holy Transformation Grass? Chu Fengmian asked Han Yueli. It seemed that no one outside knew about the Holy Transformation Grass. Otherwise, it would have spread far and wide. After all, Zhi Lingtian's status was higher than that of many half-sages. It was no wonder Zhi Lingtian dared to be so arrogant. He didn't even put the 3 Hall Masters in his eyes. Once he broke through to the God Force realm, he would become the next dean of the Institute of Martial Victory. There was no way the higher-ups of the Institute of Martial Victory would punish someone with such a bright future. It would take a year to refine the Holy Transformation Grass, so Chu Fengmian was eager to know how long it had been since Zhi Lingtian got it. It's been more than half a year. Han Yueli didn't know why Chu Fengmian suddenly asked this question, but he still answered obediently. Half a year. That means there should be 2 or 3 months left. Hearing this, Chu Fengmian calculated silently. In 2 or 3 months, Chu Fengmian had to grow to the level of a saint. This was simply a fantasy, but Chu Fengmian had no other choice. Once he broke through to Zhi Lingtian, the first thing he would do would be to kill Chu Fengmian. Facing a saint in a desperate fight, even another saint might not be able to protect him. Even with the protection of his master, Xianbei Saint, it would not be difficult for Zhi Lingtian to kill Chu Fengmian. As such, Chu Fengmian could only rely on his own strength. He had to reach a level where he could contend against a saint before Lingtian became a saint. It's not impossible for him to reach a level where he can contend against a saint in 2 or 3 months. Chu Fengmian thought to himself, others might not be able to do this, but for Chu Fengmian, this was not necessarily the case. The Battle Dragon spell that he cultivated was definitely beyond the cultivation methods of this era. Even in the 9 regions, Chu Fengmian had never heard of such a powerful cultivation method. Chu Fengmian wondered where Xing Xian had learned of such a terrifying cultivation method. With the power of the Battle Dragon spell, perhaps Chu Fengmian really had the chance to improve his strength to the level of a saint in 2 or 3 months. Don't worry, I'll settle your engagement with Zhi Lingtian. Chu Fengmian looked at Han Yueli and suddenly said, at least I don't want you to fall into the hands of that trash. Zhi Lingtian was Chu Fengmian's mortal enemy. Sooner or later, Chu Fengmian would kill him. As for Han Yueli, Chu Fengmian did not intend to let her marry Zhi Lingtian. During this period of time together, Chu Fengmian increasingly felt that Han Yueli was very similar to a figure in his heart. Hearing that Han Yueli was engaged to Zhi Lingtian, Chu Fengmian's heart was filled with anger. In his previous life, he had been wholeheartedly searching for a way to resolve the problem of his body and had never had any feelings for her. This time, Chu Fengmian was not sure how he felt about Han Yueli. However, there was one thing that Chu Fengmian was sure of, and that was that he did not want Han Yueli to marry Zhi Lingtian. Okay, Han Yueli replied in a low voice. Her voice was very low, and there was a faint sense of expectation in her voice. Let's go. It's time to leave. Chu Fengmian glanced at Han Yueli and said to her. The 2 figures disappeared from the mausoleum in a flash and returned to the holy place. They're here. The moment the 2 figures arrived at the sacred ground, several auras suddenly appeared beside them. Humph! Seeing the appearance of these auras, Chu Fengmian's expression was not surprised. He had already guessed that these people would not leave willingly and would definitely come to scheme against Chu Fengmian. Prince Yin Nan, Chu Ning, Cheng Tiankong, Feng Pixian, and Mo Ruoxue, everyone come out. Chu Fengmian looked around and shouted with a laugh. Chu Fengmian could recognize these 5 auras at a glance. Oh, Chu Fengmian, it seems that you have obtained great benefits in the mausoleum. You can actually detect our auras. A maniacal laughter rang out. A scarlet figure immediately appeared in front of Chu Fengmian. Endless spiritual energy condensed on Prince Yin Nan's body, and he could attack at any time. Beside Prince Yin Nan, Chu Ning, Cheng Tiankong, Feng Pixian, and Mo Ruoxue gradually appeared. They stood around Chu Fengmian, surrounding him tightly. It seems that everyone has been waiting for me for a long time. Chu Fengmian glanced at everyone and sneered. Where's the saint? Why isn't he here? Now, there were 6 people left in the mausoleum. 5 of them were present, and only the saint was absent. That trash saint left by himself. But to deal with you, it's the same whether he's here or not. Without a trash like him, we have one less person to share your wealth with. Chu Ning smiled coldly and looked at Chu Fengmian. The corner of his mouth revealed a bit of ferocity. Chapter 215. The Holy Sun left? Chu Fengmian had never imagined that the Holy Sun wouldn't be part of the group. He had been hoping to take advantage of the situation to get rid of everyone in one fell swoop. Who could have guessed that the Holy Sun would leave? The Holy Sun had benefited greatly from this trip to the Holy Land and would become a major threat to Chu Fengmian in the future. You're the only smart one here, Holy Sun, Chu Fengmian said. The rest of you are just as stupid as I imagined. The corners of Chu Fengmian's mouth curled into a sneer as he glanced at the crowd. Stupid? It seems you've lost your mind in the face of death, boy. After hearing Chu Fengmian's words, young master Yin Nan laughed out loud. Don't tell me you really think you can survive the combined assault of so many of us. Hand over the Crimson Flame Sword, boy, and I'll let you die a quick death. The Crimson Flame Sword, Feng Pixian, and Ruoxue both looked surprised. One of the 3 god weapons of the Torch Flame House, the Crimson Flame Sword, was actually in Chu Fengmian's possession. Chu Fengmian had far more treasures than they could ever have imagined. Both Chu Ning and Cheng Tiankong were laughing coldly in their hearts. The Scarlet Flame Sword was nothing compared to Chu Fengmian's richly lush tombstone. Once they surrounded and killed Chu Fengmian, if they joined forces, they would definitely take the rich lush steel. With the rich lush steel, they would be able to compete for the position of Dean of the Institute of Martial Victory. They wouldn't be suppressed by Ling Tian anymore. If you want the Crimson Flame Sword, you'll have to be alive to take it. Chu Fengmian smiled coldly. Looking around, he turned to Belly, Feng Pixian, and Ruoxue. I don't have any grudges with you too, Chu Ning said. Do you really want to join the fun? Chu Fengmian, I don't have any grudges with you. But if you want to take the treasure of Grand Emperor Richlush for yourself, don't you think you're going a bit too far? Feng Pixian's eyes flickered with craftiness when he heard Chu Fengmian's words. The tallest tree in the forest is the first to be destroyed by the wind, Yang Qi said. It's not a good thing for a person to stand out too much. We all found Grand Emperor Richlush's treasure storehouse at the same time. As long as you hand over the treasure and split it equally with us, I promise to leave and not attack you. How about it? Mo Ruoxue chimed in at the same time. That's right, Chu Fengmian. All you have to do is hand over the treasure trove of Grand Emperor Richlush, and I'll let you off the hook. Otherwise, even if you have the life to take the treasure, you won't have the life to spend it. Take out the treasure and divide it equally? Is there something wrong with your brains? Chu Fengmian wanted to laugh out loud after hearing half of Feng Pixian's words. Especially after hearing Mo Ruoxue's words. He looked at them as if they were 2 fools. Did he really think he could get Grand Emperor Richlush's treasure with just a few words? Should it be divided equally? Grand Emperor Richlush's treasure storehouse had only been acquired by Chu Fengmian because he had passed Grand Emperor Richlush's test. Chu Fengmian didn't believe that these people would let him off the hook just because he handed over the treasure. After all, they were all here to kill him. Besides, why would Chu Fengmian hand over the treasure trove? The 5 of them weren't even qualified to do that. I'll give the 2 of you a chance, Chu Feng said with a wave of his hand. Back off and hand over your bags of holding. Considering that you have no enmity with me, I'll spare your lives. Waving his hand, Chu Fengmian spoke in a very courteous tone. This is the last chance for the 2 of you. You have to think carefully. Are you crazy, Chu Fengmian? He said. You want us to hand over our bags of holding and spare our lives? Do you think you're the crown prince or something? Mo Ruoxue said without the slightest hesitation. Who are you trying to kill right now? Think carefully. Not even Ji Ling Tian would dare to say something like this when he was surrounded by the 5 of them. Chu Fengmian was the only one who could stand up to 5 peak wind control realm experts. How can the trash of Ji Ling Tian compare with me? Hearing Mo Ruoxue's words, Chu Fengmian laughed. Chu Fengmian already knew her answer. Chu Fengmian looked at Feng Pixian and asked, What's your answer? Young man, don't be too arrogant. No matter how talented you are, it's just a flash in the pan and you'll be killed. Feng Pixian said coldly. Good, good, good. Chu Fengmian laughed and said good 3 times in a row. Since you all want to die, I won't show you any mercy. Chu Fengmian, can you spare Senior Sister Mo's life? Han Yueli, who was at the side, said nervously. She knew how terrifying Chu Fengmian's strength was. The 5 people present were not enough for Chu Fengmian to kill. However, Mo Ruoxue was still her senior sister and a disciple of Cold Snow Pavilion. Han Yueli didn't want Mo Ruoxue to die in Chu Fengmian's hands. Okay. Chu Fengmian's eyes flashed with a trace of gentleness. The only person who could make him listen now was Han Yueli. I can spare her life, but it's unavoidable to destroy her cultivation, Chu Fengmian said. According to Chu Fengmian's character, Mo Ruoxue's answer was already a dead person in his heart. However, now that Han Yueli had spoken, there was no harm in sparing her life. However, he still had to destroy Mo Ruoxue's cultivation so that she couldn't be Chu Fengmian's enemy in the future. Thank you. This answer also made Han Yueli let out a sigh of relief. Chu Fengmian was already showing mercy by not killing Mo Ruoxue. Cripple my cultivation? Chu Fengmian, it seems that you're really too arrogant. Mo Ruoxue couldn't help but be angry when she heard Chu Fengmian's words. She was also the #1 disciple of Cold Snow Pavilion. Her strength had reached the peak of the wind controlling realm, and she could even contend with Ling Tian for a few moves. But now, Chu Fengmian actually said that he would spare her life and only cripple her cultivation. Such words that didn't put her in his eyes at all caused her heart to burn with anger. This Frost Soul sword has yet to kill anyone since I got it. Now, I shall use your blood to refine this Frost Soul sword. A green light sword suddenly appeared in Mo Ruoxue's hand. It was the Frost Soul sword that Grand Emperor Richlush had given her. The power of this Frost Soul sword was comparable to the Scarlet Flame sword that Chu Fengmian hadn't refined. Furthermore, it was made of profound ice, which was perfect for Mo Ruoxue's technique. 1,000 Miles of Ice Seal. Chapter 216. There were at least 1,000 ice crystals in the sky, which meant that there were 1,000 ice swords flying towards Chu Fengmian. Fairy Mo's swordsmanship has improved. With the Ice Soul sword, she's probably in the top 10 of the Earth list of the victorious martial nation. Fairy Mo is going all out. I'm afraid that Chu Fengmian won't be able to take a single move. That's possible. If we didn't have the fortuitous encounter in the tomb of Great Emperor Richlush, I'm afraid we wouldn't be able to take it. Seeing Mo Ruoxue's sword, although the others looked calm, they were still shocked. Mo Ruoxue's strength was on par with the others, but after obtaining the Ice Soul sword, her cultivation technique was very suitable for her, and her strength had improved tremendously. The 1,000 Miles of Ice, 1,000 ice swords, was worthy of its name. You dare to call yourself a sword cultivator with such swordsmanship? What an insult to the title of sword cultivator. Chu Fengmian looked at Mo Ruoxue's swordsmanship with disdain in his eyes. Although this swordsmanship was flashy, It didn't contain any sword intent. A true swordsmanship used sword intent to kill, so there was no need for such a flashy swordsmanship. Break! Chu Fumian spat out a word and waved the scarlet flame sword in his hand. Countless flames burst out from the scarlet flame sword, forming a sea of fire. The 1,000 ice swords were instantly devoured by the sea of fire and dissolved. Mo Ruashue's 1,000 miles of ice is a top-grade profound swordsmanship. Its power is comparable to many Earth-grade swordsmanship, but it can't hurt Chu Fengmian. Now that Mo Ruashue has the Ice Soul Sword, the power of her swordsmanship is more than 30% stronger than before. How can it not hurt Chu Fengmian? But this 1,000 miles of ice is just a test. Mo Ruashue's strength is not limited to this. The foundation of the freezing snow pavilion is extremely deep. Flame South, Chu Ning, and Feng Pixin discussed, but no one made a move. This 1,000 miles of ice was just Mo Ruashue's probing. As one of the 4 great sects, the Cold Snow Pavilion had countless trump cards. As the first disciple of the Freezing Snow Pavilion, she should have the foundation of the Freezing Snow Pavilion. When Mo Ruashue saw Chu Fengmian resolve her 1,000 miles of ice so easily, she couldn't help but reveal some shock on her face. Even if Prince Yin Nan, Chu Ning, and the others were here, they wouldn't be able to deal with it so easily. At the very least, it would be troublesome. Chu Fengmian was only at the Divine Sea Realm. Where did such a strong power come from? This won't do. If we don't kill him today, he will become a huge threat to the Crown Prince sooner or later. Murderous intent flashed in Mo Ruashue's eyes. She really wanted to kill. With a cold smile, her figure disappeared. 9 ice mirrors suddenly appeared in front of Chu Fengmian. 9 figures were reflected in the mirrors. These 9 figures were all Mo Ruashue. Ow! Everyone was shocked. Even Han Yueli, who was at the side, was equally shocked. This had clearly exceeded her expectations. Han Yueli hurriedly said to Chu Fengmian, "This illusory ice soul sword is the strongest martial technique passed down in the freezing snow pavilion. Once mastered, one's body will turn into illusory ice. Each ice mirror is actually her body. Break any one of them, and she will be reborn. It's almost an immortal martial technique. Unless she runs out of spiritual energy, she is almost invincible. Break any one of them, and she will be reborn. Then I will break all 9 ice mirrors." Chu Fengmian sneered. Although this martial technique was powerful, it was nothing in the 9 regions. Chu Fengmian was proficient in many powerful martial techniques in the 9 regions. This martial technique was not difficult for Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian held the Scarlet Flame's sword and suddenly slashed. What is he going to do? It's meaningless to hit the ice mirrors. The ice mirrors can be formed in an instant. Unless it's a saint who has the law of space. Breaking all the ice mirrors in an instant is an invincible move in the Imperial Wind Realm. Young Master Yin Nan frowned. Mo Ruashue was invincible in the Imperial Wind Realm after learning this move. He did not expect that Mo Ruashue, who was not very famous, would have such a hidden skill. He was also thinking about how to deal with this move if he encountered it. But in the next moment, young Master Yin Nan's face was instantly stunned. Not only him, but the other people's expressions were no different from young Master Yin Nan's. The scene in front of them was simply beyond their expectations. Just as Chu Fengmian struck out with his sword, 9 streaks of sword chi suddenly emerged from the sword tip. These 9 sword chi slashed the 9 ice mirrors almost at the same time. No matter how fast the ice mirrors were reborn, they could not be formed at almost the same time. Now, the 9 ice mirrors were all broken in an instant. Puff! Mo Ruashue's figure slowly appeared from the broken ice mirrors. She spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground, heavily injured. The illusory ice technique was broken. 1 sword, 9 layers. This kid, how did he comprehend such a profound sword intent? 9 sword chi were released at the same time. This was an extremely high realm in the sword Dao. 1 sword, 9 layers. 1 sword strike was enough to unleash 9 times the power. How terrifying was that? It was a realm that countless swordsmanship experts dreamed of. Now, Chu Fengmian was able to display it so easily. Let's go together and kill him. Chu Ning was the first to speak. His words were full of killing intent. Mo Ruoxue was easily defeated. This also meant that none of them could be Chu Fengmian's opponent in a one-on-one fight. Now, the five of them were gathered here to join forces to kill Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian's strength had become more and more terrifying. They must take advantage of this opportunity to kill him together. Cerulean Tyrant Fist. Chu Ning was the first to attack, sending a fist strike toward Chu Fengmian that was several times stronger than the last time he had fought Chu Fengmian. From the look of it, Chu Ning had acquired quite a bit of good fortune in Grand Emperor Richlush's tomb. Heaven-sealing God chart, Chung Tian Kong shouted, drawing on the power of the heaven-sealing God chart to lock down the area, making it impossible for Chu Fengmian to escape. Chapter 217. With just a few of you, do you think you can hurt me? Chu Fengmian laughed heartily. Seeing everyone besieging him, there was no fear on his face. There was only a mocking smile. Chu Ning, aren't you a body cultivator? Then I'll kill you with my physical strength today. Facing Chu Ming's punch, Chu Fengmian actually didn't use any martial skill or sword technique. Instead, he directly threw a punch at Chu Ming. Bang! When the two fists collided, a crisp sound was heard from Chu Ning's wrist. Chu Ming's entire wrist was twisted in a strange manner. When the two fists collided, Chu Ming's wrist was actually broken. His wrist was broken by Chu Fengmian's strength. The immense pain caused Chu Ming to scream in pain. How dare you break my hand? I'll kill you. Chu Ning howled madly. As a body cultivator, the thing he was most proud of was his body. But now his wrist had been shattered by Chu Fengmian's punch. This made him feel extremely humiliated. He clenched his left fist and threw another punch at Chu Fengmian. You still dare to attack? I'll break your hand every time you attack. Chu Fengmian's cold voice sounded again. He didn't hold back and threw another punch, breaking Chu Ning's left wrist as well. As a body cultivator, his hands were broken. This was a great humiliation that Chu Ning had never experienced in his life. What? Chung Tian Kong was the most shocked when he saw this scene. He had a good relationship with Chu Ning, so he naturally knew Chu Ning's strength. In terms of physical strength, Chu Ning could be called the strongest person below the Saint Realm. Even Ling Tian didn't dare to confront Chu Ning with his physical strength. But now, when his fist collided with Chu Fengmian's, both his hands were broken by Chu Fengmian. How terrifying was Chu Fengmian's physical strength? Damn it, this kid is going to be a big problem. No, I have to kill him today. Chung Tian Kong roared. Suddenly, he also made a move, urging the power of the divine map in his hand. A strong pressure oppressed Chu Fengmian. Burning sea of fire, chaotic sea hurricane. Young Master Yin Nan and Feng Puxian's two martial skills simultaneously blasted towards Chu Fengmian. So what if we join forces? Chu Fengmian glanced to the three of them. Suddenly, the sword in his hand flashed, and endless killing intent gushed out. This killing intent condensed on Chu Fengmian's body, making him look like a terrifying god of death. An endless amount of blood energy condensed on his scarlet flame sword. Slaughter the world. On the tip of the sword, the boundless blood chi turned into a sea of blood. The flames and hurricanes were instantly devoured by the sea of blood. Even the heaven-sealing god diagram seemed to be unable to withstand the power of the blood sea and shattered. What swordsmanship is this? It's filled with blood and killing intent. Don't worry about that for now. Let's kill this brat. Everything on him will be ours. Let's kill him first. The moment the massacre swordsmanship was unleashed, the three of them were indeed shocked. However, the three of them were experienced people, so they naturally knew that they couldn't afford to lose their composure. If they were affected by the killing intent, the effects would be similar to being affected by the saint's demonic heart art. At this moment, what they needed the most was to remain calm. Your willpower is quite firm. Not bad. Unfortunately, the massacre swordsmanship isn't just powerful in terms of killing intent. Its most powerful aspect is its endless power. Chu Fengmian swept his gaze across the crowd and sneered. Blood Sea Sword. The sea of blood returned to the tip of Chu Fengmian's sword and turned into a long sword. Suddenly, it slashed down on the crowd. Boom, boom, boom. The moment the tip of the sword fell, it was accompanied by an endless amount of blood energy. Chu Meng, who had both of his hands severed, was the first to be engulfed by the blood energy. In the blink of an eye, his body was withered, and his blood energy had been sucked dry by the massacre swordsmanship. At the same time, Chu Meng's bag of holding fell into Chu Fengmian's hand. Opening it, Chu Fengmian saw that the profound body pill that Grand Emperor Richlush had given him was still in Chu Meng's bag of holding. From the look of it, Chu Meng hadn't had the time to absorb the pill, which now belonged to Chu Fengmian. Now that Chu Fengmian had acquired the legacy of Grand Emperor Richlush, the profound body pill had been his to begin with. And now that it was in Chu Fengmian's possession, it was like returning it to its rightful owner. With the exception of Chu Meng, Cheng Tiankong, Feng Pakshuan, and young Sir Flame South were the only ones who had managed to evade the sword attack. However, they were all covered in wounds, and not even their combined strength could stand up to it. How dare you kill Chu Meng, Chu Fengmian? Aren't you afraid of Family Chu's revenge? Our family Chu is one of the 4 great clans of the Institute of Martial Victory. The leaders of the Institute will definitely come to kill you. Cheng Tiankong shouted angrily at the sight of Chu Meng being killed. Family Chu has a sage. If he gets angry, not even your master will be able to protect you. Cut the crap, Chu Fengmian said. I'm going to kill you first, then wait for your 2 great clans to come for revenge. Cheng Tiankong, Family Chu, one of these days, I'll destroy your 2 great clans and bury them with you. Snorting coldly, Chu Fengmian waved his crimson flame sword again, sending a stream of sword energy toward Cheng Tiankong. This sword chi contained boundless killing intent. It was a small slaughter sword chi. Young Sir Flame South and Feng Pakshuan couldn't help but take a few steps back, worried that they would be caught up in the crossfire. After witnessing the sword attack just now, their hearts were filled with fear, and they didn't dare to help Cheng Tiankong. Bam! The stream of sword energy slashed toward Cheng Tiankong, but stopped when it was about a meter away from him. A barrier of spiritual power appeared in front of Cheng Tiankong, which was none other than the black scale armor he wore. Black spear armor. So that's the spirit item Grand Emperor Richlush gave you. Thanks to him, you managed to escape. You don't qualify to have that armor. Hand it over. Chu Fengmian glanced at the black shuttle armor, then suddenly grabbed at Cheng Tiankong. A powerful spiritual energy rushed into Cheng Tiankong's body, trying to pull the black shuttle armor out of his body. No. Chapter 218. However, Cheng Tiankong's spiritual power couldn't be compared with Chu Fengmian's. His spiritual power struggled wildly, but it was directly crushed under Chu Fengmian's spiritual power. Cheng Tiankong's body was trampled to the ground under Chu Fengmian's power, unable to struggle. In an instant, a black scale armor was grabbed by Chu Fengmian from Cheng Tiankong's body and into his hand. At the same time, Cheng Tiankong's body suddenly exploded, and countless blood spurted out and was absorbed by the sword in Chu Fengmian's hand. Without the black armor, Cheng Tiankong couldn't resist Chu Fengmian's power and was instantly killed. Cheng Tiankong's storage bag also fell into Chu Fengmian's hands. This black armor is enough to make most of the wind-resisting realm warriors unable to break it. Chu Fengmian glanced at the black armor and suddenly waved his hand, and the black armor flew directly toward Han Yueli. I'll give you this black shuttle armor. With it, you'll be able to avoid a lot of danger. Chu Fengmian said, and under the urging of spiritual power, he directly injected the black armor into Han Yueli's body. When the black armor was integrated into Han Yueli's body, only the lines were exposed, and others couldn't find it at all. Only in times of danger would it be exposed. The black armor was indeed useful for Chu Fengmian. At least it could be used to resist the attack of a wind-resisting realm warrior, but compared to Chu Fengmian, Han Yueli needed it more. After all, Han Yueli's current realm had just stepped into the wind-resisting realm and was still very weak. With the black armor's protection, Chu Fengmian would be more at ease. What about you two? Are you going to kill yourselves, or let me kill you? Chu Fengmian turned his eyes, looked at Yin Nan and Feng Pakshuan, and said coldly, Chu Fengmian, don't be complacent. Do you really think you're invincible? Now you have offended the Crown Prince, and the Chung family, Family Chu, and the entire Wuxing Academy are your enemies. Provoking the two of us, do you want to be enemies with the four major sects? Seeing Chu Fengmian approaching step by step, Yin Nan shouted loudly, When you leave the Holy Land, you will pay the price. So tough? Very well. It seems like you also want to die. Chu Fengmian coldly glanced at Prince Yin Nan. Perhaps Chu Fengmian wouldn't have killed him if he had been a little more sensible. But now, he was unyielding and even threatened Chu Fengmian. If Chu Fengmian didn't kill him, he wouldn't be able to face his own heart. Die. Chu Fengmian waved his hand, and the scarlet flame sword in his hand once again condensed an enormous ball of blood chi. He slashed it towards the Southern Flame Prince. Don't underestimate me. Thousand-leaf flame dragon. Young Master Yin Nan let out a loud roar when he saw Chu Fengmian attack. As the young master of the Candle Flame sect, he was one of the top 5 geniuses in the Wuxing country. Since when had he been controlled by someone in such a manner? In front of young Master Yin Nan, endless flames suddenly emerged and transformed into a 1,000-meter-long flame dragon. With a dragon roar, the flame dragon rushed towards Chu Fengmian. Be careful, this 1,000-mile flame dragon is the Middle-Earth grade martial skill of the Candle Flame sect. It is extremely powerful. Once you touch it, you will be directly devoured by the flames. Han Yueli hastily reminded Chu Fengmian. However, she was still too slow. The moment the 1,000-mile flame dragon appeared, Chu Fengmian's right hand made a grabbing motion, and the 1,000-mile flame dragon was forcefully crushed in Chu Fengmian's hand. He could crush a Middle-Earth grade martial skill with his bare hands. Young Master Yin Nan's face changed when he saw this scene. Chu Fengmian's strength had already exceeded his imagination. With such strength, he even suspected that the Chu Fengmian in front of him was impersonated by someone else. To be able to possess such terrifying strength with the cultivation of the Divine Sea Realm, Chu Fengmian's strength had already far surpassed Jiling Tian. What? Don't you have any other means? Looking at young Master Yin Nan's lifeless face, Chu Fengmian revealed a mocking smile. If that's the case, then you can go and die. Chu Fengmian, I am the young master of the Candle Flame sect. If you kill me, the Candle Flame sect will not rest until you are dead. Young Master Yin Nan roared. His strength was far from being Chu Fengmian's opponent. The only thing that could make Chu Fengmian wary was the Candle Flame sect behind him. Unfortunately, such a threat had no effect on Chu Fengmian. Instead, it only made Chu Fengmian's killing intent more intense. Threat? If the Candle Flame sect dares to go against me, then there is no need for the Candle Flame sect to exist, Chu Fengmian said coldly. Arrogant. It was an extremely arrogant sentence. This sentence shocked everyone present. The Candle Flame sect was a sect that had been passed down for thousands of years. As one of the 4 major sects of the victorious Wu country, it had a deep foundation. Not to mention a Divine Sea Realm martial artist. Even a saint would not dare to say that he could destroy the Candle Flame sect. Arrogant. You will pay the price. You will pay the price for provoking the Candle Flame sect. Young Master Yin Nan roared crazily. Noisy. Chu Fengmian snorted coldly. The scarlet flame sword in his hand flashed, and a blood-red sword chi suddenly slashed towards young Master Yin Nan. No, I am a genius and the future sect master of the Candle Flame sect. How can I die in the hands of such a brat? Young Master Yin Nan roared loudly. He crazily urged the spiritual energy in his body to struggle. Suddenly, a huge amount of spiritual energy burst out and turned into a sea of fire as a final resistance. It's useless. Break for me. Chu Fengmian's cold palm suddenly fell. It contained an extremely strong spiritual energy, and it pressed down. The sea of fire on young Master Yin Nan's body was instantly shattered. In the next moment, the blood-red sword chi had already pierced through young Master Yin Nan's body. This Young Master Yinnan's blood qi gushed out and merged into the slaughter sword art, increasing the power of the slaughter sword art. The more blood qi it absorbed, the more powerful the massacre swordsmanship would become. After killing Chu Ning, Chung Tiankong, and young Master Yinnan, Chu Fengmian could feel that the power of his slaughter sword art had increased by 10%. All three of them were super geniuses of the victorious Wu country, and their blood qi was incredibly strong. Now that Chu Fengmian had killed them, it was only natural that he would become even stronger. At the same time, Chu Fengmian waved his hand and pulled young Master Yinnan's bag of holding out of his withered corpse. These people were all top geniuses of their respective sects, and had acquired quite a bit of wealth from Grand Emperor Richlush's mausoleum. Chapter 219. Chu Fengmian, your strength. Han Yueli, who was standing aside, was already stunned. She knew that Chu Fengmian's strength was definitely above these 5 people, but she didn't expect it. For a character like young Master Yinnan to be so easily suppressed by Chu Fengmian, such strength was probably enough to contend against Zhiling Tian. Chu Fengmian came to Wu Sheng Academy for less than a month. At that time, Chu Fengmian could only compete with some divine sea realm warriors. Any wind-controlling realm warrior was enough to defeat Chu Fengmian. In a month, Chu Fengmian had grown to such a terrifying extent. This kind of strength, what kind of level was it? He was probably invincible under the Saint Realm. The last one, only you are left. Chu Fengmian's eyes swept over Feng Puxian. Now, among the 5 people, Emo Ruoxue was defeated by Chu Fengmian and fell to the ground. Chu Ning, Chung Tiankong, and young Master Yinnan were all killed by Chu Fengmian. The only one left was Feng Puxian. Seeing Chu Fengmian's gaze, Feng Puxian's face couldn't help but show some fear, and his body couldn't help but tremble. In 3 moves, young Master Yinnan was killed. Young Master Yinnan was the young master of the Candle Flame sect, a peerless genius cultivated by the Candle Flame sect, but he was easily killed. Feng Puxian's strength was at most on par with young Master Yinnan. Since Chu Fengmian could easily kill young Master Yinnan, naturally, he could also easily kill him. Brother Chu, this time I was wrong. As long as Brother Chu Fengmian spares me this time, I am willing to hand over the saint-breaking pill. Feng Puxian's body trembled, and his voice was trembling. Oh, it seems that you are smarter than young Master Yinnan. Seeing Feng Puxian bowing his head and admitting his mistake, Chu Fengmian's eyes showed a bit of a playful smile. Chu Fengmian, you can't believe him. Feng Puxian has always been cunning. Once you believe him, I am afraid it will lead to a disaster. Han Yueli hurriedly said, Brother Chu, if you don't believe me, how about I give you the saint-breaking pill now? Hearing Han Yueli's words, Feng Puxian spoke first. Not only the breakthrough saint pill, I'd rather form a contract with you and serve you for the rest of my life. How about that, Sir the Master? Hearing this, Chu Fengmian raised his brows. He originally felt that Feng Puxian's words were deceitful, but since Feng Puxian even said something like forming a contract and serving the master, Chu Fengmian's eyes flashed with surprise. What? On the side, Han Yueli didn't expect Feng Puxian to say such words. Forming a contract and serving the master meant that Feng Puxian was willing to be a slave in order to survive. This was simply beyond anyone's expectations. Are you sure? Chu Fengmian glanced at Feng Puxian and laughed. If you really recognize me as your master, it is not impossible for me to spare your life today. As long as Brother Chu is willing to spare me this time, I'm willing to acknowledge you as my master. How about we form a contract right now? As Feng Puxian spoke, a sudden spiritual power condensed in front of him, and a contract suddenly appeared. An ancient contract. This contract was enough to make Feng Puxian recognize Chu Fengmian as his master. Once it was signed, Feng Puxian's life will belong to Chu Fengmian, and Chu Fengmian could kill him with a thought. Well, since you are willing to surrender, I will spare your life today, but this contract must be signed. Chu Fengmian glanced at the contract and noticed that there was nothing unusual in it. He dripped a drop of blood on it, and suddenly, two names flashed on the contract. Boom. After the contract was signed, it split into two and drilled into the two people's bodies. Chu Fengyan felt that Feng Pexian was already suppressed by the contract. As long as Chu Fengyan's thought moved, it was enough to kill him. However, although the contract has been signed, this restriction still needs to be placed on your body. Chu Fengyan glanced at Feng Pexian and suddenly sneered. A spiritual power suddenly rushed towards Feng Pexian. Heavenly Death Seal. Chu Fengyan's thought silently, and this spiritual power turned into a seal and penetrated into Feng Pexian's body. Feng Pexian subconsciously wanted to resist with his spiritual power, but under the power of the contract, he couldn't move at all. He could only watch as the seal penetrated into his body. Feng Pexian's face revealed a bit of unwillingness, as if his conspiracy was seen through. "Kneel," Chu Fengyan suddenly said. This sentence made Feng Pexian's face change in an instant. "Young master, he wanted to say something, but he felt the power of the law oppressing him. Once this ancient contract was signed, one would be under the supervision of the law." Feng Pexian couldn't resist Chu Fengyan's order. Although he was extremely afraid, his eyes flickered a bit, but in the end, he obediently knelt on the ground. Good. Seeing this scene, Chu Fengyan laughed, and at the same time, his eyes once again looked at the jade bottle in Feng Pexian's hand, showing a bit of greed. "Since you said so, then you can present the breakthrough Saint Pill yourself." Chu Fengyan glanced at Feng Pexian and laughed. "Yes." Feng Pexian bowed his head and respectfully said. He held the breakthrough Saint Pill in his hand and presented it. "Young master, please take it." "Good." Chu Fengyan smiled and stretched out his hand to take the breakthrough Saint Pill. Almost at the same time as Chu Fengyan stretched out his hand, a smile suddenly appeared on Feng Pexian's face. In the palm of Feng Pexian, a strong hurricane suddenly emerged. Whirlwind scattered clouds. The endless hurricane bombarded Chu Fengyan's chest at the same time. This sudden change, even Chu Fengyan didn't seem to be aware of it, and he was suddenly sent flying. Feng Pexian's figure stepped forward and laughed. "Chu Fengyan, you are still too greedy. A warrior at the peak of the wind resisting realm as a servant. Sure enough, even you can't avoid dying because of greed." "What's going on?" Han Yueli, who was standing on the side, saw this scene and his face changed greatly. Chapter 220. Ancient Contract? How could such a thing be of any use to me? Feng Pexian looked at the shocked Han Yueli and laughed loudly. "It seems that you have only heard of my rumors, but don't know the reason behind them. My cultivation technique is enough to dissolve all the contracts of the 9 regions. No contract has any effect on me. Unfortunately, there are always some idiots who believe in this so-called ancient contract." Feng Pexian's voice was indescribably proud. So what if Chu Fengyan was powerful? Didn't he still die in his scheme? This move, Whirlwind, was a high-grade Earth-level martial technique. It was one of the most powerful martial techniques on the 3 Immortal Island. Now, at such a close distance, without any defense, only death awaited Jiling Tian. Even a saint would be seriously injured. Chu Fengyan would undoubtedly die after being hit by this move. Unfortunately, the final winner is still me. Young Master Yin Nan, Chu Ning, and those idiots deserve to die. Once we leave the Holy Land, it will be my time. Feng Pexian laughed while looking at Han Yueli with a lewd smile. "I heard that you have a marriage contract with Jiling Tian, but sooner or later, Jiling Tian will be trampled under my feet. You should follow me." Feng Pexian laughed while grabbing Han Yueli with one hand. Whoosh! But almost at the same time, a sword light slashed out in an instant. Feng Pexian's hand was directly cut off and fell to the ground. "What? Chu Fengyan, you didn't die?" The sudden appearance of the sword light made Feng Pexian hurriedly retreat. His eyes swept around and saw Chu Fengyan, who suddenly appeared beside Han Yueli. His face changed greatly. At such a close distance, his whirlwind actually didn't kill Chu Fengyan. "Humph! But even if you didn't die, you're now seriously injured. What's the point of struggling? I'll kill you first." Feng Pexian sneered. Suddenly, his figure flashed, and his whole body turned into a hurricane and swept towards Chu Fengyan. "Oh!" You think that I can't deal with you because you signed a contract? It's just the golden cicada rotation art. Do you really think you're some kind of invincible cultivation technique? Looking at Feng Puxian's attack, Chu Fengmian sneered. With a thought, Feng Puxian's figure was suddenly bound by a huge force in midair, unable to move. Rule force. What Chu Fengmian was activating was the restriction on Feng Puxian. Impossible. All the contracts and restrictions in this world should have no effect on me. How could they bind me? Seeing that his body was bound by the power of law, Feng Puxian shouted. He had used this move to ambush and kill countless experts. Because of this, there were all sorts of rumors about Feng Puxian. But today, this was the first time he encountered being restrained by the power of rules. This shouldn't be possible. The golden cicada reversal art that I cultivate can transfer all restrictions and contracts to other places. I wasn't the one who signed the contract, so how could I be affected? Feng Puxian roared at Chu Fengmian. This was simply a scene that he had never imagined. His golden cicada reversal art was actually ineffective. The golden cicada reversal art is just some sneaky cultivation technique. It can dissolve all the contracts and restrictions. Chu Fengmian's mouth revealed a bit of disdain. Chu Fengmian was aware of all the schemes of Feng Puxian. Naturally, he had heard of the golden cicada reversal art. Can dissolve the contracts and restrictions? Those are just some ordinary contracts and restrictions. The heavenly death seal that Chu Fengmian put in his body was supported by the power of the heavens. Even if Feng Puxian died, the heavenly death seal would not disappear. Dying. A thought flashed through Chu Fengmian's mind. Feng Puxian could feel that there was a huge force on his body that wanted to crush him. After being hit by the heavenly death seal, Feng Puxian's life was controlled by Chu Fengmian. Now, Chu Fengmian's mind was enough to kill Feng Puxian. Brother Chu, I was wrong this time. You've already put a restriction on my body. Can you spare me this time? Feng Puxian's figure suddenly knelt in front of Chu Fengmian and begged bitterly. He had already felt that with the heavenly death seal on his body, as long as Chu Fengmian wanted to kill him, he would be killed with just a thought. Feng Puxian did not want to die. He would rather be a slave and fall today. It's too late. Chu Fengmian's eyes turned cold. With a thought, the restriction on Feng Puxian's body suddenly increased by a lot. Feng Puxian's body was crushed under the force of the attack, like a crushed watermelon. Blood and qi burst out. Chu Fengmian's sword moved and absorbed all the blood qi into the slaughtering sword technique. Chu Fengmian gave Feng Puxian a chance. Unfortunately, since he did not cherish it, Chu Fengmian would not give him a second chance. Your plan was good, Chu Fengmian, but what a pity. Did you see this coming? A cold, piercing voice rang out, causing Chu Fengmian to jerk his head around. Not too far behind him, Han Yueli was a figure with a sword pressed against Han Yueli's neck. Mo Ruoxue, who had been defeated by Chu Fengmian before, actually still had the strength to silently hold Han Yueli hostage. Let her go, Chu Fengmian said, his face cold. He could never have guessed that Han Yueli, who was right next to him, will be held hostage by Mo Ruoxue. What are you doing, elder sister? Han Yueli said, shocked. He could never have guessed that Mo Ruoxue, a fellow disciple of the Frigid Snow Pavilion, would suddenly kidnap him. Junior Sister Han, I don't want to do this either. Unfortunately, I don't want to return empty-handed from this trip to Grand Emperor Richlush's mausoleum. Mo Ruoxue's face flashed with greed. Chu Fengmian, hand over your crimson flame sword and all the treasures you took from Grand Emperor Richlush's mausoleum. Otherwise, she'll lose her life. Mo Ruoxue's expression was extremely cold. You don't want our junior sister Han to be hurt, do you? Mo Ruoxue, do you really think you can hurt her? Chu Fengmian looked at Mo Ruoxue, his words filled with anger. Let her go, and I'll let you leave alive. Oh, the choice is not in your hands. Mo Ruoxue looked at Chu Fengmian and laughed. Chapter 2:21. If you dare touch her, you'll die. Chu Fengmian looked at Mo Ruoxue, his eyes filled with killing intent. It had been a long time since Chu Fengmian had such killing intent. If he had the chance, he would kill Mo Ruoxue without hesitation. But now, Chu Fengmian couldn't do it. He couldn't gamble on whether Mo Ruoxue could break the defense of the black armor. If he lost, the price would be Han Yueli's life. I know I'll die, but my life in exchange for junior sister Han's life is worth it. Mo Ruoxue's lips curled into a cold smile, her eyes filled with greed. Since she dared to kidnap Han Yueli, she naturally wouldn't be afraid of Chu Fengmian's threat. Hand over your scarlet flame sword and all the treasures in rich, lush, great Emperor's tomb, and I promise I'll let her go. What do you think? You want the treasures, or you want her? Choose. Mo Ruoxue sneered. I'll say it one last time. Let her go, Chu Fengmian said in a low voice. He had been merciful to Mo Ruoxue and didn't kill her, but he didn't expect to encounter such a crisis. It seemed that if he didn't kill his enemy, it would be a disaster. Chu Fengmian's heart had softened. Don't even think about it. If you don't hand over the treasures, I'll take her down with me, Mo Ruoxue said angrily. The sword in her hand was even closer to Han Yueli's throat. Damn it, die. Chu Fengmian's face was red with anger. He had never been threatened like this before. Mo Ruoxue deserved to die. He didn't want to use the rich, lush monument, but now he had to kill Mo Ruoxue in one move. Although he couldn't use the slaughter sword art, he still had the rich, lush monument. Burn. Sacrifice. Chu Fengmian threw out a sky full of energy-amassing pills from an empty ring. A total of 900,000 energy-amassing pills were all burned. At the same time, an enormous object 10 times its size smashed towards Mo Ruoxue. Boom! Under the continuous explosions, Mo Ruoxue's figure was blasted into pieces. Not even a trace of her was left behind. Normally, activating the richly lush steel would only require 100,000 energy-amassing pills. But this time, Chu Fengmian had used up 900,000 energy-amassing pills to kill Mo Ruoxue. He pushed his power to the limit and attacked. Mo Ruoxue couldn't even put up a bit of resistance before she was completely annihilated. Han Yueli looked in Mo Ruoxue's direction with a complicated expression. Her momentary soft-heartedness had almost caused a disaster. Thankfully, Chu Fengmian had held back and hadn't used the rich, lush tombstone earlier. Now that he had, the unexpected result was that he had managed to kill Mo Ruoxue. Han Yueli looked at Chu Fengmian, not knowing what to say. In the end, she was the one who had caused this trouble, but now she still needed Chu Fengmian to solve it. It's fine. Consider this a lesson for you. Chu Fengmian looked at Han Yueli and said with a chuckle. As long as Han Yueli wasn't injured, this wasn't a big deal. Chu Fengmian looked at the sky and made a grabbing motion. Suddenly, a storage bag and a green longsword appeared in Chu Fengmian's hand. I'll give his Frost Soul sword to you. Chu Fengmian directly handed the Frost Soul sword to Han Yueli. Han Yueli looked at the Frost Soul sword, hesitated for a moment, and then said, You're also a sword cultivator, so I'll give this Frost Soul sword to you. I already have the Scarlet Flame sword, so this Frost Soul sword isn't very useful. Moreover, this Frost Soul sword's attribute is extremely compatible with your cultivation technique, so you can unleash its full power. Chu Fengmian laughed and stuffed the Frost Soul sword into Han Yueli's hands. Moreover, you still need to have the strength to protect yourself. Otherwise, I'll be worried all the time. Han Yueli originally wanted to say something, but after hearing this, her face turned red. In the end, she could only obediently accept the Cold Soul sword. Let's go. Seeing Han Yueli accept the Frost Soul sword, Chu Fengmian's face revealed a relaxed smile. Now that the biggest treasure in the holy grounds had been taken by Chu Fengmian, it was useless to stay in the holy grounds, so it was better to leave now. Chu Fengmian had obtained enough benefits from the trip to the holy grounds. Okay, Han Yueli nodded, and the two figures left toward the entrance of the holy grounds. At the entrance of the holy grounds, it was time to part. Han Yueli had to return to the cold snow pavilion, and Chu Fengmian had to return to the Wuxing Academy. It was time to go back. But now, Chu Fengmian's face was a little disappointed. During this period of time, Chu Fengmian was not used to being alone. Han Yueli was the same. She had never been so dependent on someone before. Now it was time to part ways. Chu Fengmian looked at Han Yueli and said in a low voice, I'll find you and take you away. Hearing this, the disappointment on Hanua Li's face changed into surprise. "Okay, I'll wait for you," Hanua Li said softly. Her figure flashed and left the holy grounds, turning into a ray of light and flying toward the cold snow pavilion. Chu Fengmian also turned into a ray of light and flew toward the Wuxing Academy. It would take a long time to fly from the holy grounds to the Wuxing Academy, and they had to take the Arkansas. But now, Chu Fengmian had stepped into the Divine Sea realm, and his strength was comparable to the peak of the wind-controlling realm. His speed was almost not slower than the Arkansas. Moreover, even if Chu Fengmian used all his strength, he did not need to worry about running out of spiritual power. With all his strength, Chu Fengmian arrived at the Wuxing Academy in 4 to 6 hours. The Wuxing Academy was as prosperous as ever. Chu Fengmian returned to the Wuxing Academy and ignored the others. He flew to the top of the mountain and went to the courtyard of St. Xianbei. What a fast ray of light! Who is it? This faint dragon power. It's Chu Fengmian. He actually came back from the holy grounds. It seems that Chu Fengmian's strength must have obtained great benefits in the Holy Land. His strength has become even stronger. Chu Fengmian's disappearance during this period of time made others know that he had entered the holy grounds to cultivate. But they did not expect that Chu Fengmian would return from the holy grounds in just a month, and it seemed that he had benefited greatly. Go and report to the Crown Prince that Chu Fengmian is back, and the Chung family and family Chu. Tell the news to the two families, and they will definitely reward you. Chapter 222. That brat Chu Fengmian actually came out of the Holy Land alive. Two elders were sitting in a huge courtyard, and a young man was standing in front of them. The young man was the one who brought the news. The Martial Victory Academy was a place where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold. Every inch of land was extremely precious. To be able to build such a large courtyard in the Martial Victory Academy, the owner of the courtyard must be someone of high status in the Wuxing Academy. The plaque at the entrance of the courtyard had the word Chu written on it. Only the family Chu, one of the 4 great clans of the Wuxing Academy, could own such a huge courtyard. Isn't Chu Ning in the Holy Land? Why didn't he kill that brat? The elder couldn't help but frown. He knew that Chu Fengmian had the abundant lush monument. As soon as Chu Fengmian entered the Holy Land, he relayed the news to Chu Ning, who was in the hopes of killing Chu Fengmian and taking his rich lush steel. But now, Chu Fengmian actually came out of the Holy Land unscathed. Could it be that Chu Ning met with an accident? Although the elder didn't believe it, he could vaguely sense that Chu Ning had indeed gone missing. Now that Chu Fengmian came out unscathed, it was very likely that Chu Ning had met with an accident. We also lost contact with Chung Tiankong from the Chung clan. The other elders sitting at the side said in a deep voice, "But it doesn't matter. That old man Xianbei has left to look for the beyond heaven's realm, leaving only that old servant. No one in the Wuxing Academy can protect that brat. Let's send someone to capture him now. The abundant, lush monument and the treasures on him must be ours." On the other side, Chu Fengmian had already arrived at the courtyard of the Xianbei Saint. However, the courtyard was filled with countless scars. It was extremely dilapidated, as if it had experienced countless battles. "What's going on?" Chu Fengmian's eyes turned cold. This was the courtyard of the Xianbei Saint. Now, someone had dared to fight here and even destroyed the place. Chu Fengmian moved his divine sense and immediately discovered an aura in the courtyard. This aura was already extremely weak, and it looked like it had been seriously injured. Elder Chun. Chu Fengmian's figure moved and hurriedly arrived in front of the aura. Seeing old Chun lying on the ground, Chu Fengmian's expression changed greatly. Old Chun's body was now full of scars and countless fist marks. It seemed that he had been seriously injured. Although he was not dead, if Chu Fengmian had come a few days later, old Chun would have been crippled even if he did not die. Chu Fengmian's eyes flashed with killing intent. Damn it, who did this? Chu Fengmian hurriedly took out a few healing pills from his empty ring and fed them to old Chun. Thankfully, Chu Fengmian had acquired Grand Emperor Richlush's treasure storehouse, and although there weren't many precious items, there were still plenty of medicinal pills. Chu Fengmian took out the best ones and fed them to Elder Chen. He watched as Elder Chen's spiritual power gradually stabilized. Only then did Chu Fengmian's expression calm down. Although he hadn't known Elder Chen for very long, it had been Elder Chen who had stepped in to protect Chu Fengmian from Chu Hongsha. Now, Elder Chen was seriously injured, and it seemed that he had been injured in this courtyard. Who would be so audacious as to do this? Furthermore, Saint Xianbei was nowhere to be seen. Otherwise, Elder Chen wouldn't have been in such a state. A few minutes later, the medicinal effects began to take effect, and Elder Chen slowly rose to his feet. Coughing a few times, he opened his eyes and looked at Chu Fengmian. "Young lord, what's going on here, Elder Chen? Who was it that injured you like this?" Chu Fengmian's eyes flashed coldly. It didn't matter who it was. Chu Fengmian was determined to kill whoever did this to him. Elder Chen had helped Chu Fengmian a lot in the past, and in the Institute of Martial Victory, he was essentially Chu Fengmian's master. Therefore, there was no way Chu Fengmian would let the matter rest. Just as old Chen opened his mouth to speak, a few auras suddenly descended upon the courtyard, causing his expression to change drastically. "Young lord, run. Ha ha ha, it's too late." A disdainful voice could be heard all of a sudden, as a few middle-aged men walked out from the residence, each of them wearing disdainful smiles. "Old man, hand over the treasure. We're here on the orders of the Institute. Since Saint Xianbei is no longer here, his treasure should be handed over to the Institute of Martial Victory." Most of them were at the Imperial Wind Realm, and the leader was at the 7th level of the Imperial Wind Realm. He was Chu Hongsha, whom Chu Fengmian had met before. "Young lord, they're from the family Chu. Run away quickly. I'll help you stop them." Elder Chen slowly stood up when he saw those people approaching, and he wanted to stand in front of Chu Fengmian. "Old man, you're already seriously injured. Why are you still holding on? I'm afraid you won't be far from death if you continue to hold on." Chu Hongsha looked at Elder Chen and said coldly, "Hand over the treasure obediently so that we don't have to do anything." "Elder Chen, rest at ease. Leave these people to me." Chu Fengmian glanced at Elder Chen and said softly, "Leave them to you? Who do you think you are?" "Chu Fengmian, do you really think you have the qualifications to fight me just because you went to the sacred land?" Chu Hongsha looked at Chu Fengmian with disdain in his voice. "Last time, you were lucky enough to survive from me. It was this old man who saved you. Now that this old man is seriously injured, let's see what qualifications you have to be arrogant. Let me tell you, now that your backer is gone, anyone here can easily kill a junior like you. There's no need to make a futile struggle. I heard that you went to the sacred land. Very well, hand over all the treasures you obtained from the sacred land. Kneel down and kowtow a few times, and I can consider letting you live. How about it?" When Chu Hongsha said that, the faces of everyone present were filled with greed. They had all heard of the treasures in the sacred land. They all knew that cultivators who came from a sacred land would definitely have countless treasures. They didn't have the qualifications to obtain the treasures of the Xianbei Saint, but they could snatch and share the treasures on Chu Fengmian's body. "Trash like you dare to cause trouble in this courtyard?" Chu Fengmian's eyes were cold as he looked at those people. Chapter 223. What? Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, the group of people all laughed. Asking them to commit suicide? Even some of the grand elders of Wuxing Academy wouldn't dare to talk to them like this. An inner disciple, who wasn't even a core disciple, didn't think he could do anything. A family Chu disciple with several scars on his face said directly to Chu Fengmian, "Kid, who do you think you are? Your master, Saint Xianbei, is no longer here. No one can support you now. You're just a piece of trash? Genius, bah. Today, I'm going to beat up a genius." The family Chu disciple laughed and suddenly threw a punch at Chu Fengmian. So what if Chu Fengmian was talented? He wasn't even in the Divine Sea realm. As a warrior in the wind-controlling realm, he wasn't afraid of a warrior in the Divine Sea realm. "Young master, be careful." "Let me do it," Old Chen said worriedly. Although Chu Fengmian's talent was amazing, his realm was still too low. How could a warrior in the Divine Sea realm compete with a warrior in the wind-controlling realm? He wanted to help Chu Fengmian block the punch, but Chu Fengmian stopped him. "You're courting death," Chu Fengmian said coldly. Seeing the punch coming, he suddenly waved his hand, and an endless amount of spiritual energy was released. The power of the family Chu disciple's punch was dissolved in an instant. The family Chu disciple was laughing, but now he couldn't say a word. The family Chu disciple's throat was tightly gripped by a giant hand made of spiritual energy. He couldn't speak at all. His face was red because of the suffocation. He activated his spiritual energy crazily, trying to break free. He was a warrior in the wind-controlling realm, but now he couldn't even struggle in the hands of Chu Fengmian. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. When the group of people reacted, the family Chu disciple was already in Chu Fengmian's hand. "Let him go," Chu Hongsha roared. "Kid, be careful. If you dare to kill our family Chu disciple, no one can save you today. You must die." Before he finished his words, the family Chu disciple's throat was crushed and his head was separated from his body. Even his essence and blood were all absorbed by Chu Fengmian's killing sword technique. "So what?" Chu Fengmian sneered and looked at Chu Hongsha. The moment he attacked, it meant that he was already a dead man. "Not only him, but all of you will die today. Anyone who dares to attack in this courtyard will die." Chu Fengmian's tone was very flat, but everyone could hear the terrifying killing intent in his voice. With Chu Fengmian's personality, he had always been a man of his words. He had never lied. "Kill! Kill him! How dare he kill our family Chu disciple? Today we must kill this kid and hang his corpse in front of our family Chu's gate. We must let others know the consequences of provoking our family Chu." The other family Chu disciples were filled with righteous indignation. Their spiritual power suddenly erupted. However, just as they opened their mouths to speak, the faces of the Chu family's disciples all turned red. Their throats were all grabbed by Chu Fengmian. Bang! 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 Blood splattered everywhere. The family Chu disciples were all killed by Chu Fengmian. In the blink of an eye, more than a dozen family Chu disciples were killed by Chu Fengmian. This scene made the remaining family Chu disciples feel a chill in their hearts. No one dared to make a sound. Many of these Chu clan disciples were inner sect elders and outer sect elders in the Martial Victory Academy. They were all figures of respect and reverence for countless disciples. But now, in the hands of Chu Fengmian, they were like ants. They were easily killed. He could easily kill more than a dozen Imperial Wind realm martial artists. This kind of strength was simply hair-raising. "Kill him. This kid is no longer human." Chu Hongsha roared crazily. These family Chu disciples were the elites of the family Chu. In the future, some of them might be promoted to the position of Grand Elder. But now, they were all killed by Chu Fengmian. Anger surged in his heart. Chu Hongsha was furious. This scene was simply an insult to his family Chu. It was a disaster for his family Chu. "Chu Hongsha, didn't you want to kill me before? Today is the day you die." Chu Fengmian glanced at Chu Hongsha. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Endless killing intent erupted from Chu Fengmian's body. "Die for me." As soon as these words came out, a huge spiritual energy palm grabbed at Chu Hongsha. Even with Chu Hongsha's cultivation at the 7th level of the Imperial Wind Realm, he felt that the power of this spiritual energy palm far surpassed his. It wasn't something he could contend against. Impossible. How can a Divine Sea Realm kid have such strength? It's definitely fake. Chu Hongsha shouted hysterically. He activated all of his spiritual energy and suddenly attacked Chu Fengmian's huge spiritual energy palm in an attempt to block it. But how could Chu Hongsha's strength contend against Chu Fengmian's? In almost an instant, Chu Hongsha's body was directly sent flying. He fell onto the ground. Under the spiritual energy, countless bones in his body were forcibly shattered. He didn't expect Chu Fengmian's strength to be so strong. A month ago, when he faced Chu Fengmian, he thought Chu Fengmian was only a junior that he could casually kill. But now, in a short month, Chu Fengmian had grown to such a level. He could defeat him with one move. How could he believe this? But even if he didn't believe it, the pain that came from his body couldn't be faked. The immense pain caused Chu Hongsha to scream miserably. His scream made the hearts of the others turn cold. Chu Hongsha was the leader of their group. He was the most powerful person. At the 7th level of the Imperial Wind Realm, He could contend against many core disciples. But now, he was defeated by Chu Fengmian in one move. Just how terrifying was Chu Fengmian's strength? The second Zhiling Tian? Many people felt that Chu Fengmian was even more terrifying than Zhiling Tian. After all, Chu Fengmian had only been in the Martial Victory Academy for a month and a half. Chu Fengmian, you can't kill me. I'm an inner elder of the Martial Victory Academy. If you kill me, the Martial Victory Academy won't let you go. Chu Hongsha was defeated by Chu Fengmian in one move. He fell to the ground and hurriedly shouted. His only hope now was that the Martial Victory Academy's reputation would give him a chance to live. Unfortunately, Chu Fengmian's expression only changed. It became even colder. Boom! You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.